So great, members. Welcome to the welcome to the little bit of though I do like the sound. Though I do like the sound of my own voice. Arctic. Even that's a bit much. Okay. Just to say, well, we get started. We're going to have 3 oral briefings today, which is why we're starting at 1 o'clock. One from the fiscal, one from departmental officials on the upcoming, we hope, Fiscal Council Bill. Second on the Public Sector Transformation Board, and then moving into closed session. Some of the same officials will brief us on the Public Sector Transformation Board. Okay. So, welcome everybody to the 23rd meeting of the Committee for Finance in the 22 to 27 mandate. Members, the proceedings will be broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and, as always, online. If you are using your phone, either put it on airplane mode or turn it off, or put it on silent. We have item 1 is apologies. We have apologies from Owen Tennyson and Deirdre Hargey, and one member, Jerry Carroll's, joining us via Zoom. We've already, in closed session, welcomed our new Assistant Clerk, Sarah Ann McKinley, who is here to assist us in a very busy work programme that we have, certainly for the rest of 2024 and indeed for the rest of the mandate. So welcome to Sarah Ann. Next agenda item is declaration of interests. Members, you are obliged to declare any relevant interests before any meeting takes, before the start of any meeting. You can, if something occurs to you as we go on, you can do that as well. But does any member have anything they wish to declare at this stage? No. Okay. Agenda item 3 is chairperson's business. I do have one bit of chairperson's business which I haven't flagged yet to the clerk, but it's simply grist for the mill for the work we are doing and hope to do in this committee on financial services and the apparent absence of a clear policy focus in terms of financial services in Northern Ireland, and some of the questions, and we know that at least one minister, the finance minister, has taken an active interest in this. There has been a publication by Which. I'm sure you all very informed consumers use Which magazine. So there's the latest survey of Which bank branch closures show that Northern Ireland has the highest of the devolved regions, has the lowest number of bank branches per head. So I just wanted to raise that. I think that is an important bit of context and data that we're going to have to take forward and look at. I think it reinforces the point both that there's questions to be asked about availability of access to bank branches and all the consequences that has for the microeconomy in rural areas especially, but also the sense that there isn't necessarily enough of a clear, focused policy and political response and channel to respond to that, given, as we have talked about repeatedly, the relative absence of Northern Ireland in terms of the policy discussion in London when it comes to financial services. So I just wanted to raise that and put that on the record. But we will be taking that forward in the weeks to come. Agenda item 4 is is draft minutes of the meeting we held on the 18th of September 2024. That's at page 7 of the meeting pack. If members are content that they are a fair reflection of what we discussed, then I will sign them. I presume they are. Okay, the next agenda item is matters arising. And this relates somewhat to what we've just discussed on chairperson's business. Concerns around increased insurance premiums. Members, the Department has provided detail of the Minister of Finance's and departmental officials' engagement around the cost of insurance premiums in Northern Ireland. This engagement includes official liaison between HMT and the FCA, as well as ministerial meetings with the Association of British Insurers and the British Insurance Brokers Policy. In the latter, issues raised included factors contributing to the higher cost of premiums here. We are told that officials are now going to re-engage with HM Treasury and the Financial Conduct Authority to ask what actions are being taken. The Department indicates that an update will be provided when there is further progress. Members will recall that we have already asked the Department for an assessment of the impact of higher insurance premiums on the budget, i.e. the Northern Ireland budget, and an update will be provided. Responses are awaited to that. We're also aware that the Justice and Economy Committees has scheduled an informal meeting with the ABI next month to discuss the issue. So That is to note at this stage, though I would say it, I think, only serves to underline the importance of us growing and continuing this work strand around financial services, because the Minister is and in fairness to her, is clearly taking action on this, and we as a committee both have responsibility to scrutinise what the department's doing, but also do our job to kind of, I think, fill in the gaps here. So if anybody else wants to make any comment on that. Sure, okay, fine. Well, we'll note that at this stage and then forward it to the Justice and Economy Committees. Item 5.2 is student loan underspend, the explanation that was sought. Members will recall, it's at page 19 of the meeting pack, and members will recall that in last week's meeting with briefing with Joanne McBurney on the monthly outturn, we discussed the policy change with respect to student loans, which will see a further reduction in the Executive's ring-fenced resource DEL allocation for student loans. Briefing on this issue was previously provided to the committee following its meeting on the 17th of April, and members can find a copy of that at page 19 of this week's pack. Members will see the explanation provided, and I quote, "While the new approach has resulted in a reduction in funding provided to the Executive, this methodology has still resulted in funding provided to the Executive in 23-24 exceeding the amount required by circa 280 million. This 280 million is not an underspend, but rather the result of a funding methodology which cannot entirely account for differences in student loans between England and the devolved administrations." So just to repeat, this is effectively I suppose you could describe it as an accounting anomaly which arises because fees are higher in England, so therefore the Barnett consequential, which goes to the Northern Ireland Executive to account for that, is higher, but our universities charge lower fees. And Steve Aiken wishes to come in.
Yes, Chair, that's all well and good, but I've just noticed in the last sentence the fact that it's rather the result of a funding methodology which probably better actually. Funding methodology, I said it again, methodology which cannot entirely account for differences. Entirely account? That's a rather strange wording.
Well, I think I suppose what they're saying is that they can't construct a methodology for creating a resource DEL Barnett consequential that is completely irons out or removes the differential funding needed for different student loan spending.
Chair, remember we had all that big conversation about getting rid of black boxes and how we're going to make sure things were sort of more transparent, and we're going to look at these. I would be perfectly fine with it, except rather the result of a different funding methodology. But the language cannot entirely account for. I just find it a bit odd.
I would say that's probably a linguistic thing, but I'm happy for us to just ask the question.
Yeah, we can, if we keep that one on bring forward, we'll actually get next time Joanne McBurney is anyone just ask her. Yeah,
if
she can just.
It might be one of the better. It's better to have an official explain to us, to be honest, because if the allocation is slightly evened out, as it were, then we need to understand what that process is. But I think this isn't just a form of words which.
It's just that Joanne's normally so precise in her language. Just thought.
Well, we'll ask that question. Can I suggest we bring that we take make
to do with the fact it's also done for Scotland and Wales.
Sure. Okay. But we can ask that question whenever it comes to.
I just read it. Thought it sounded strange.
That's the note at this stage, and we will ask that question whenever we get the opportunity. The next agenda item is the Interparliamentary Finance Committee Forum. Draft correspondence to the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Members will recall previous attempts, not only by this committee but also other devolved finance committees, to get the Treasury Ministers and officials to engage. Previous correspondence had been issued but remained unanswered due to the pre-election period. The Interparliamentary Finance Committee Forum will issue this letter on behalf of the devolved finance committees, encouraging the new Chancellor to engage with the devolved regions more fully than her predecessors. In the letter, an invitation has been issued to both the Chancellor and her colleagues to begin dialogue with the devolved administrations. They have also been invited to explore common areas of interest with the Interparliamentary Finance Committee Forum. So just to highlight, this has already been agreed by the Scottish and Welsh committees. I'll bring members in 1 second. I think it's really important that we send this letter. I think there is a degree of unanimity both here in the Assembly, but also in other devolved regions, that there needs to be a much better at a bare minimum, more respectful and productive relationship between the Treasury and devolved scrutiny committees in the devolved regions. So I think it's really important that we send this. But I'll bring members in.
It's just a very quick one. I hosted the Deputy Speaker of the Welsh Senate here last week, and that was one of the things we were talking about. And he was saying one of the issues that they were having, that even with the change of administration, the attitude from the Treasury hasn't changed a lot. He would wish to encourage as much, particularly in the finance areas, of us all working together to do that as well. And I said I would pass that message on to the committee and particularly to the chair. But thanks.
Well, I think that's entirely germane to our conversations, and I think it is true that I think it's fair to say that I probably should declare an interest as someone who many years ago worked in the Treasury. There is a default official position which sometimes departments will revert to. Even if at a political level they have pledged, quote unquote, a reset. I think it's very important that we continue to be robust with the Treasury, particularly whenever we have completely preposterous things happening, like happened a couple of weeks ago, where mid-ranking officials are telling other officials in devolved administrations that they have to put a freeze on hundreds of millions of pounds of vital investment. So I think it's really important that we are, as a committee, completely robust. Okay, including with the officials and not just the... Okay, people are content in case anybody else wants to come in. Agenda items 5.4 and 5.5 are the Hansard transcript of oral evidence sessions on rating policy and deaths and stillbirth legislation. So that's the pages respectively 24 and 37 of the meeting pack. This is to note the transcripts. Unless anybody really has any quick corrections they want to make, it'll be included in our report on both of those items going forward. Okay, agenda item 6 is the Fiscal Council Bill, and we're going to get an oral briefing now from the Department, and they are here to give us an update on the Fiscal Council Bill, which, as people know, has been talked about for some years now, including in the previous mandate. It was also included in the legislation programme, which was submitted to the Assembly, I believe, in May of this year. The most recent update from the Department indicates that the aim is still to introduce a bill before the end of this calendar year, but, quote, that the legislative programme must be managed across the executive as a whole, including light of resource capacity and competing workloads across the NI Civil Service. However, engagement between the Bill team and OLC is ongoing. A further draft provisions of the Bill is expected to be sent to the Bill team in the coming weeks. When the draft bill is complete, the executive approval will be sought for its introduction. The Department has also indicated that, quote, in line with due process, the Fiscal Council Bill team will share an advance copy of the bill and explanatory and financial memorandum on an in-confidence basis prior to introduction to the Assembly. That's with this committee? Is it? Yes, with the committee. In this case, the Department has clarified that in confidence simply means that the bill will be in draft and not for wider circulation. Before we begin the evidence session, I should seek members' agreement that we will ask Hansard, who are here, to record that. I presume people will be in agreement with that. And I welcome to the meeting Tony Simpson, who's Deputy Secretary for Strategic Policy and Reform, Wendy Leckie, who's Director of Strategic Policy and Reform, and Sarah Wilson, who's also from Strategic Policy and Reform teams. There are a multiplicity of papers for this session: a clerk's cover note, previous briefing material from the Department, the OECD report, which previous members of the previous Finance Committee will have scrutinised at some length, which was on recommendation of the Council on principles for independent fiscal institutions, and the previous Finance Committee's report on its inquiry. If you could bear to go back and read the utterances of myself and Steve Aiken from 2021.
Mr. Fruit.
And Mr. Fruit, of course.
21. I'm far too young for that.
An updated briefing paper was provided by the Department subsequent to the meeting pack and can be found at page 3 of your tabled pack. We will invite the officials to make a brief, if possible, opening statement, and then we'll have questions. Thank you.
Okay, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair, Deputy Chair and members. we welcome the opportunity to meet with you today to update you on progress on the Fiscal Council Bill. And as you say, I'm delighted to be joined by colleagues who have been leading this work. Wendy Leckie, as you say, who's the Director of Strategic Policy Division, and Sarah Wilson, who's a Deputy Director in the division, who's been leading this, who leads the Fiscal Council Bill and sponsorship team. You've already discussed, so I understand. I'm guessing trust members have had an opportunity to read the latest update. And with your kind of permission, Chair, just to set the scene, I thought it would be useful just to briefly provide some background on the Council's establishment and outputs to date before updating you where we are on the drafting of the legislation.
Yes, but a relatively brief one, because we have the Fiscal Council in front of us fairly soon,
Okay.
and they can tell us what they're doing in the nicest possible way. I think what we need to know is about the legislative provision to give them permanence. But yes, do make it brief.
Okay, no, I'll maybe skip then the background in terms of the progress of the Council and just go straight to the legislation then. So the Minister provided an update to the Committee Chair in June on the bill, including a copy of the agreed policy document. And from that, you'll be aware that the bill has been included in the Executive's legislative programme for this year. And the aim is for drafting to be completed before the end of this calendar year, hopefully all being well. And however, as you'll appreciate, the timings towards introduction depend on how quickly the details of the bill can be settled. In addition, obviously, the legislative programme needs to be managed across the Executive as a whole. Engagement between the Bill team and OLC is ongoing, and in particular regarding various details of the specific functions of the Council. And this is inevitably taking some time to ensure that the underpinning legislation will be clear, robust and unambiguous. OLC has indicated that it aims to provide a further draft of the clauses of the bill within the coming weeks to our Bill team for our consideration. And it's anticipated that some further matters of detailed policy, in addition to those relating to the functions of the Council, are likely to necessitate some further examination and clarification between ourselves and OLC. The Department will of course seek to introduce the legislation to the Assembly as soon as reasonably possible, and as we continue to work in collaborations with OLC and DSO through the drafting and instructing process, we'll of course keep the Committee updated. We will welcome the Committee's engagement throughout this process, and as you said earlier, we will share the draft bill once available, and are more than happy to attend the Committee through the process to discuss this. And that's a very short, hopefully brief enough update of where we are on the bill.
That was admirably brief and much appreciated, Tony. Now, just on the timing, obviously the executive legislation programme was quite clear that the what was in the legislation programme were bills that were due to be introduced in the calendar year 2024. But if I'm given to understand your evidence, there is no longer certainty that the Fiscal Council Bill will be introduced in 2024.
Not certainty in terms of the calendar year, but as we said, that's the aim, is to have the drafting completed in the calendar year, certainly, hopefully, so that we are ready for introduction in the financial year.
So, in the financial, so by the end of March, then is the kind of slightly new target. So the Fiscal Council Bill was first committed to by Conor Murphy when he was Finance Minister in, I think, either 2020 or 2021. The previous Finance Committee did a lot of work on the context, and my understanding was then that, we took lots of evidence from the Department. Would I be being unreasonable if I said that a reasonable person might say there's been a lot of discussion on this already, this piece of legislation should be relatively uncontroversial, a lot of work happened in the previous mandate, why is it taking so long?
Well, we're just trying to ensure that the language and the bill is actually, is quite precise. So there's a number of elements in the terms of reference where, through engagement with the OLC, we want to ensure that it has that precision for very clear legislation. Through some discussions between ourselves and OLC and the Fiscal Council themselves, there's also, we want to ensure that the unique, if you look, it's not something you can simply transcribe and go, there's Fiscal Councils and across the water, and we need to do something similar. There's unique circumstances in Northern Ireland that we need to ensure that the legislation is future-proofed.
Okay.
So, in terms of who might be bringing budgets through, whether or not that was in every possible circumstance, whether that was direct NIO ministers, whether that's local ministers, the timing of that, some of the definitions. So there's some particular elements that we're seeking to refine.
All that was known in 2021 and 2022.
Well, some of this has more come to light in terms of our engagement with OLC. So in terms of the discussions, so obviously we can only begin the formal drafting process formally after the policy paper was agreed by the Minister, by the Executive, which happened in June. Yeah. Now, as you say, we have undertaken as much preparatory work as we could in the years before that. Yeah. So actually, while it would be reasonable to assume that this would be further advanced, actually, in another way of looking at it, we're actually well advanced because OLC colleagues agreed with us at risk to begin that drafting process, so we're not starting from scratch.
They did it at risk before the institutions returned?
Yes.
Or, okay.
Yes, as much as was possible, but obviously the final policy position needed to be confirmed by the Finance Minister and the Executive.
Can you say drafting, were they drafting the actual bill or the draft provision? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so they have
some of that. So yes, so when the Executive agreed the policy position, we weren't going to OLC with a policy paper and going.
There is a draft. There is a draft bill at the minute.
Yes, okay. So significant work has been undertaken to date, but we're seeking just refine the fine detail of that with OLC colleagues.
And what are the other things that have come up that have given you pause or caused more work?
Well, there's some of the definitions in it. So we've been debating around the terms of reference, for example, that was agreed in post NDNA aren't precise enough for the type of language you would need around what is sustainability, what do you mean by that, when may budgets be, there's annual budgets, what happens if the budget timetable slips, so on. There's things like that, and then around, as I've said before, who might take a budget through. So there are some of the areas where we're just trying to nail down the precision to make sure that the legislation is future-proofed as it can be for any changing circumstances.
And has any of this been affected by work on, for example, the budget sustainability plan, which we are due to get briefed about later on? Any of that other work that's going on inside the department in terms of post-restoration, budget sustainability, the new Joint Exchequer Committee, those various other strands of work, even I suppose the Public Sector Transformation Board, is any of that, has that in any way delayed the development of your legislation?
No, well obviously the department is a significant number of priorities that we're trying to advance, but no, we have a separate bill team that we have working on this, which with the restoration of the Executive, we staffed up again. Obviously we didn't keep a bill team in place when there was no Executive and work on that was delayed, but no.
Okay, I'm going to open up now to questions. The first is the Deputy Chair.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks very much for coming to speak to us on this. I just wanted to ask you around just the independence of the Fiscal Council that's being brought forward under this bill. Just if you could give me some details around the clarity and where that's sitting at the minute.
Yeah, well, the legislation, I think when you speak to the chair as well, you can ask him. But our view would be that the Fiscal Council has been operating fully independent of the department to date. One of the key focuses of the legislation will be underpinning that independence in legislation. But yes, in terms of the way the bill will be drafted, or intent for the bill is that it gives a very broad remit for the Fiscal Council, so that it can assess the sustainability of Northern Ireland finances, examine the budget process, but it is up to the chair and the council to determine their own work plan, what they're going to report on, and the nature of their work without any interference from the department at all.
The legislation will be based on that, which is links you back then to the OECD principles for international fiscal institutions.
No, that's brilliant, thank you. Just the independence and clarity on it, and perception of independence is just so important if we're taking the step to move forward on it. In terms of the costs of running this, as it moves forward with the bill proposal, what sort of level of cost do you think there will be for running this?
I think at the moment the budget for the council is in around the 600,000 mark. Obviously, we need to consider if those costs will change once it's formally in statute, and does that require any, would there be some functions, where it's maybe relying on some civil service support in terms of HR and finance? Will that be done in-house? Will they need a link back to the department? So we need to consider that as it moves forward. But really what we have sought to do, is it won't need to tell members of the pressures on the budget generally and on the department in particular. We've sought to protect as much as possible the budget of the council so they can undertake its duties. And obviously this is something that you may well pick up with the chair when he's giving evidence next week.
And that is something that we're working with the council on at the moment, considering that, as they move into a statutory body, what corporate functions, for example, as Tony talked about, that they might have to take on, and what additional staff and resources they might need for that.
Absolutely, and whenever we're looking at the tight budget situation that we're under, setting up something new and looking at the costs is something that is easy to turn away from. But it's good to see this progressing and coming up to the executive, because the role that it plays in our overall finances is so important. Thanks very much.
Yeah, I would strongly agree with that. I've been a very robust advocate for this for years, in part because it'll not just a political scrutiny role, but also not that the capital P political, but it'll provide, you would think, a degree of certainty to the public, and indeed to people like investors, should our institutions collapse again, that there is some robust oversight. Steve Aiken.
Yeah, just a couple of ones. I noticed, Sir Tony, when you said further policy implications, are these significant? You said the OLC had brought back and said there were further policy implications. Are those significant, or is it just, as you were saying, it was sort of matters of drafting and getting linguistics correct?
Yes, I would say the latter.
So there's nothing fundamental about...
There's no fundamental concerns being raised in our discussions. The way I see it is just that getting that precision that's required for the legislation in terms of the definitions of the functions.
And just thinking about the funding of it as the rest of it, obviously it would probably come under the transformation agenda, because this is absolutely essential for us to be able to understand our finances and where we're going forward. So obviously the question of finance needs to be sort of ironed out fairly quickly, because we need to understand when the bill goes through, what the overall sort of impact it's likely to be. But I think I would fully agree with the chair. It needs to be ring fenced, or it needs to be built into the whole transformation process and funding as well, because that is a vital way of ensuring that this doesn't get starved of resources, because therefore there's no point in doing it.
Indeed, yeah. I don't know if you want to respond to that.
Yeah, no, well, it wouldn't be. We're not looking at it separately under transformation, but yes, no, there's a core line in our budget within my directorate for the Fiscal Council. We engage with the Council Secretariat on a monthly basis in terms of their needs. And as I said, we have sought to protect the council from any kind of budgetary pressures, so they, as far as we are aware, are comfortable with the level of resourcing they've had. We'll keep a watching brief on that in our regular discussions with them.
They'd be funded directly by the Assembly, a bit like the audit.
That's what I was getting to.
It's a different, so it's an NDPB, so it's set up as an NDPB rather than, we've looked at that, what's the classification, so the funding for it flows through the department rather than directly from the
I appreciate that. I appreciate that's the way it was set, or that is the way it was set up in whatever it was, 2020 or 2021. But I suppose, and maybe I'm asking you to make a policy judgment that's unreasonable, but has the department looked at whether it would be more appropriate to underpin its independence to make it a directly funded entity of the Assembly, for example, a little bit more like the Audit Office is, where there is a direct scrutiny function of the Audit Committee, and there's, by the way, then there's complete transparency over its accounts, and the public can see that Caesar's wife, as it were, is living up to the expectations it's asking of other executive departments.
Yeah, we had looked at the appropriate classification earlier. This maybe I'll let Sarah comment on that.
So it's obviously one thing that we considered when we were drafting the policy document is about how we set it up. And in doing so, it's not really just a decision for the department. It actually goes up through a process where we look at the classification. It goes to ONS and they also make a judgment. And I think the feedback really from ONS was that because OBR is set up in that way and Scottish model is slightly different, but they felt that the classification should remain similar and be classified as an NDPB. So in that respect, getting that feedback, we've made the judgment then that the classification should be as ONC or ONS has recommended.
It's different, but the Scottish Fiscal Commission is that set up? Is that set up differently?
It's slightly different because of the way their government is set up. It's set up as a non-ministerial. I think the department. I'd have to just check the detail, and I can provide more detail on it.
Come back to, just because in one sense you would say that they are more closely aligned to our model than the OBR, in that the OBR is a sovereign entity and they do economic forecast. But I also want to come back to the economic forecast point, but I'll bring in others. Paul through.
Yeah, so just keeping on that train of independence and the finances of it, why do you think that the bill or the cost of the Fiscal Council will go up simply because of its statutory footing?
Well, the corporate functions of the council at the moment are supported through the department in terms of HR, the finance function. So as it becomes an independent body, we will need to look at with the council, how do they want that corporate support? Is that something they would like in-house? Or would they like support from the department on those kind of corporate HR and finance functions? That could be something that, if they're brought in-house, there will be an additional cost for the council. Now, that will be a reduced demand on the department. So in one way, some costs could go up and other costs for us could go down. But we need to look at how those functions are delivered.
Surely, if it is purely independent, they'd want to be in-house. How would you have a fiscal council with seconded Department of Finance officials working within it?
Well, there could be a mix. So again, that will be for the council to determine. So there could be a mix of permanently appointed staff, seconded staff. So there's one in terms of the staffing, who they are and the individuals and how they're recruited and appointed, and then there's the bread and butter of the payroll and HR functions, as opposed to actually who the individuals are. I suspect probably looking at other bodies across the water, they will have a similar mix of directly appointed staff and then secondees in from the administration. There is an advantage to having some secondees in because they have an understanding of the system from the inside. So, but that will be a matter, I suppose, once council is established, we will need to discuss with them how they want to staff up their organisation. But really, to ensure that there is that independence, that will be where we look in the direction from the Fiscal Council themselves, as opposed to the department suggesting here's how you should staff up your organisation.
So we're proposing the bill, and I take it that the finance for the burden for the Fiscal Council will come directly out of the Department of Finance's budget?
Yes.
In its entirety? Yes. Is there any safeguards that can be placed in to allow a transparency and a barrier from pressure, if you like? And is there any best case models in Scotland or Wales around this stuff?
Well, the council, there will be reporting requirements on the council to report in terms of its annual accounts, and Sarah can correct me if I'm wrong. So there will be reporting of its budget, of its staffing level. So there will be transparency around the level of resource that it's given, and it will have to produce annual accounts and reports and so on. Yeah.
And just to say, in the legislation we have, that is in legislation that the department is required to fund the council, so there can't be a decision just to remove the funding.
No, but so there's a requirement from the department to fund the council, but if the Fiscal Council asks for an uplift and proved, and the department says because of budgetary pressures we can't maintain that level of funding, or we can't give you that uplift this year, which could then affect the work of the Fiscal Council, or let me put it more draconian way, Fiscal Council produces a report that the Department of Finance doesn't like, and then all of a sudden next year the budget's cut.
Well, the legislation safeguards its independence. It sets out its functions that the council will need to deliver on. So there's an obligation on the department to ensure that those are appropriately funded to enable it to do that.
Yeah. And I think it's not just a case of the department will set the budget. There is always a discussion with the council, and that's similar to the way, say, the audit office accounts are looked at, where there is a discussion at the committee about what they want versus what is available. So it is just that two-way process. So if the accounts, or if the estimates are reasonable and are presented, and if they want to increase the work and there's an increased cost, I think this committee probably would be coming back to us saying, well, why are we not funding it? So I think the scrutiny will be there, both from us as a department, but also I know that the council would bring forward issues if they felt that we were, we're restricting their abilities as such.
Is the Audit Office not one of those organisations that states that they haven't enough funding?
But again, I
Repeatedly?
suppose, and the Audit Office do come to the committee and ask for additional funding, and the committee has to make a judgment and consider the arguments that are put forward, and it's exactly, I suppose, the same process. And I know our colleagues in DOF actually provide input into that process, so it'll be exactly the same process where the council will put forward what they require, and then there will be that two-way process of discussion and dialogue. What I would say is the department and the permanent secretary is very mindful of protecting the budget and has protected the budget to date, and they haven't had any cuts, and will continue to do that because we recognise the invaluable work and significant work that they've done to date. So I anticipate that would continue, and I'm sure the committee would agree that should continue as well. So,
will there be anything in the bill that produces a connection with the Audit Office to basically a memorandum of understanding where we know exactly where the Fiscal Council sits and we know exactly where the Audit Office sits? Because I would worry about duplication of work, which would cost us.
I think we have put in place a number of memorandum of understanding across departments, also with the Northern Ireland office, and we would anticipate that there would be further ones down the road. Now, obviously, we can suggest to the council that they should consider that, and I know that there is dialogue with the Audit Office. What we wouldn't want to do is direct them, so if they feel that would be useful, then, and we certainly could say to them that is something that came up committee that they should consider, and then if they feel that would be useful, then they can take that forward.
But if the Department of Finance or the Minister had a view on this as to where both organisations sit, surely you could put it in the legislation to make it a statutory requirement?
Well, the legislation will be very, our intention, and that's where our work on OLC, our work with OLC colleagues, is that we need to be very clear and very precise about what the role of the council is. On its own, separate from any other organisation in terms of what it's doing. So we need to be precise around that role of the council and looking at the Northern Ireland finances overall and the sustainability of those, rather than looking at individual. Obviously the Audit Office has a different role.
Yeah, and I think as part of this process, we've also looked at the legislation that established the Audit Office and the Controller General as well. So that has been taken into account. Obviously, that we don't, aren't putting any functions in that they are doing as well. So OLC again has been very helpful in making sure that we're dovetailing those two pieces of legislation, and it's certainly something that we will bring back to them as well to make sure that continues. But we have been mindful of that, and the OBR legislation, for example, it's actually the same piece of legislation for Audit Office, and then it runs into the OBR legislation. So we have been mindful of that throughout the process, so that we don't overlap or, obviously take on additional duties that are not within the remit of the council.
What powers will the Fiscal Council have in summoning people and papers?
Well, access to information is a key element of the legislation. So, if you were to say key elements of it are its independence and being able to access information. So, at the moment, we have MOUs with all the government departments to ensure that there's an appropriate flow of information. And the council, as far as we are aware, are satisfied with the information that they're getting from all executive departments. That will be kind of copper fastened in the legislation. So, there's an obligation on departments to provide the information that the council need for them to perform their duties.
What will that process look like? And in that process, if there is a prevarication or barriers put in place, is there an appeal mechanism for which they can call you up?
Within the MOU, it stipulates that if there's any issues from officials given the council information, it can be escalated right up to the permanent secretary.
Of the department?
Yeah, of the department, and that they can come then to us, the Department of Finance, as the lead sponsor as well, and we'll try and resolve it through that mechanism. But we're going to look again at the MOUs whenever the bodies in statute review the MOUs that are already there and amend them as necessary.
So the committee here has powers to summons. Will they be similar powers for the Fiscal Council?
For information, so as far as my understanding of at the moment is it's around information. So they don't sit in committee like yourselves and someone's officials up, but we would expect that if they need a clarification or meetings with senior officials from departments, that would be facilitated. In terms of how it's defined, it sets out the nature of the information that the council will require, the financial information that the council will require to be able to discharge its duties. So we would that will be very clear for departments in terms of what they need to provide the council, and they need to comply with any requests.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Nicola Brogan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I'm just following on for some of those questions. I suppose, first of all, what impact do you think that the Fiscal Council has had already without being on a statutory footing, and how important have they been? And what risks, I suppose coming on from Paul's questions there, what risks do you foresee if the Fiscal Council wasn't, if this bill wasn't to go forward and this wasn't to be put on a statutory footing?
Well, I think the impact that the council to date has had a very significant impact. In the short time that it's been in existence, I think it's produced around 20 reports, which is a significant output from the organisation from a standing start. One of the most significant pieces of work that's had a very significant impact for us is their work around relative need in Northern Ireland, which informed the interfiscal framework that was signed by the Finance Minister in recent months, where previously there wasn't that evidence base in Northern Ireland about the extent of relative need in relative need. And that's having a very real and tangible impact on the resources that are available to the executive. There's also some of their other reports have pointed to how we can improve transparency around monitoring processes for our monitoring rights, for example. So part of the work in the budget sustainability plan that is under development by the department will be setting out how the department is going to improve that process, improve the transparency, the different tables that will be produced, and one would hope that they will be useful to this committee in particular. So it is having a very real impact, I would suggest, and in particular even just that general understanding of public finances and how they work. It is a very complex matter. So in terms of even as well just improving public discourse, so yes, I would say it's have a very significant impact. In terms of the risks, Sir Robert himself, I think, has said that the council is working very well without the legislation. He thinks it will be well. He welcomes the fact that we're going to put it on a statutory basis. He doesn't see that. He doesn't think that that's something that is causing him any problems at the moment. He will be able to answer for himself. But obviously, what we want to do is copper fasten that independence, that access to information through the legislation.
That's fair enough. Thank you. And I know you touched on this before, Tony, but maybe you could elaborate on it about the steps that the department had made when the executive was down to push this here, to carry on with this here bill. Yes,
well, so back before the collapse of the Assembly, so obviously the previous Minister, Conor Murphy, had agreed a policy paper. We were unable to bring that to the executive because there was no executive at that time. However, there were caretaker ministers, so Minister Murphy circulated that to the two caretaker ministers to take their views. We got any of those views were then fed back into that process of developing the paper that then went to the current Finance Minister, Minister Archibald. And as we said, then we with the agreement of OLC colleagues, they began that drafting process. So there was significant drafting already done on the stocks on the basis of that previous policy paper, which provided a very solid foundation for us to begin that work again once we got the new policy paper agreed.
And just finally, with this bill, can the role of the council be expanded or changed with the actual bill?
Yes, so the functions are very broad to give a lot of latitude to the council to kind of determine their own work programme. It is envisaged that, perhaps, for example, if the executives decide to take on additional fiscal powers, for example, in the time ahead, that the role of the council could evolve. So, yes, so it sets that basis for the council to look at what they do and whether or not we may need to return through perhaps secondary legislation to expand the role if there's a very formal role for it, say forecasting, tax revenues and so on. But yes, so there is scope for it to be expanded.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Jerry Carroll.
And Jerry.
Jerry, can you hear? We can't hear you. I don't know if you can hear us.
Yeah, last week's links were terrible.
We will bring Jerry in as well. Just a couple of further questions from me. Just to go back to some of what Paul Frew was asking about around the question of we are going to resolve the issue and bring Jerry in as soon as we can. On the question of access to papers, it is right to say, as I understand it, that what the British government are trying to do at the minute is amend the original Budget Responsibility Act that created the OBR to create to firm up the legal obligations on the Treasury to provide documents to the OBR. I think, or to ensure the OBR has the information it needs to, for example, produce forecasts. Obviously, some of us are still dealing with higher mortgage payments as a result of Liz Truss's budget in October 2022. Part of that was that they didn't update. It was that the OBR were not the information wasn't given to the OBR, so they didn't produce a forecast ahead of that. Is that something you're looking at? Because surely if that's being updated, and you're talking earlier on about the need to be kind of in parallel or lockstep, or at least reflect what the budget responsibility, the OBR legislation does, shouldn't this legislation create a legal compulsion for the department to provide papers to the Fiscal Council?
Yeah, well, it does. It will require the department to provide the information that the council needs to can perform its functions. Perhaps the role of the OBR is broader, obviously, than our Fiscal Council in producing forecasts of what the impact of tax spend and borrowing decisions of the UK government are going to be. So the work that's ongoing in London and that is that, as you say, that can tighten up the requirements.
It is, but that's clear, because it was mentioned earlier on, that is clearly part of the forerunner or the model is the OBR legislation. Just on that, on the broader work of the OBR, something I've talked about, and it's not current. There's nothing stopping the Fiscal Council doing, but it's not mandated in law, which is economic forecasting, or at least providing some. They could, for example, gather and publish an average or summary of other external economic forecasts, and they could obviously build their own model and produce a forecast where they resource to do it. Is that something that's being looked at, as opposed to simply a spending analysis?
Well, the key thing around forecasting for the OBR is I suppose it's not the OBR forecast of the economy. When you're thinking about public spending, it's not around the economic forecast as such as an output. The key output from that is what does it mean for tax revenues as a consequence of economic growth.
The OBR does produce an economic forecast. The OBR does produce a saying they think the UK economy will grow by 2%.
Yes, they do. But I suppose what I'm saying is from a financial viewpoint, that in part is a component which feeds into what will the resources of the Treasury be. So yes. Economic growth, how will that feed into income tax, corporate tax, all the rest. So there's nothing in the current bill around forecasting requirements, but obviously that will impart the requirement for that in terms of tax revenues will determine will be dependent on what tax powers the executive may or may not ask.
Wouldn't that, because there's no official, so I have often thought one of the deficiencies we have here is that our policy making discussion we don't join up the key economic metrics that are specific and local to here with policy interventions here. And I don't just mean GDP growth, that could be unemployment level, that could be economic inactivity, which we talk about a lot here and is a real challenge. It could obviously, it could be one of a number of things. I just wonder whether it would be useful for the OBR, the Northern Ireland Fiscal Council, to produce or at least collate an authoritative official set of economic indicators, and they could be indicators rather than forward-looking forecasts, that are published alongside their analysis of our spending decisions, so that the public and us as legislators can say, well, actually, this is the decisions we make here have an economic impact, and they have an impact on things like employment. How are the executive policies affecting that?
It is something we're thinking about, and there's a step before that in terms of what's the output, in terms of what are the data requirements to do that sort of forecasting. So we have had discussions with our colleagues in NISRA, and a key piece of work going forward, particularly in light of any decisions around tax devolution. But you're right, that is a role that the council could take around more general economic forecasting. Is what information, what data does it need? What do our statistician colleagues need to produce to enable that proper forecasting? So that's a piece of work that we will need to do, but it's not currently in the legislation.
I personally think it would be genuinely useful, and I mean this like not in an oppositional way. I think if, for example, when making the argument for more money being spent on childcare, which we feel, or to choose another, to grasp another nettle when it comes to investment in wastewater infrastructure, however that is funded, if there was a means by which, I think we'll have Jerry Carroll back on now, if there's a means by which the Northern Ireland Fiscal Council was able to produce an analysis of the broader economic impact of investment in wastewater infrastructure, which unlocks house building and a whole range of other positive developments, that would better, just frankly, unlock a better policy discussion in this place. So there's an official record of it. But that was kind of a statement rather than a question. So at this point, I'll bring in Jerry Carroll. Jerry.
Thanks, Chair. Just I couldn't unmute there, just to let you know, but seems okay now. And internet's a bit slow, so camera not on. Thanks for the presentation. Quick comment and then a question. I mean, obviously, generally speaking, economics and finance can often be viewed in sort of abstract terms, abstract debates quite often, but it's obviously real decisions affecting people's real life. So I want to ask just the department in terms of the presentation and the bill being drafted. Have you considered, or is it within the remit of this bill, to ensure there's a trade union voice on the Fiscal Council, to ensure there's a human rights body or individual on the council? Is that in the terms of reference? Can that be added now? Where does the power lie to that? Because I think that's casting aspersions on anybody currently, but I think those voices are quite often left out of the debates around finance and economics, and not only are the members of those organisations usually impacted negatively by economic decisions, but unions and other groups have a wealth of experience in terms of researchers, policy around economics and finance. So has that been considered at the minute? And if not, can it be part of the bill, or would it have to be an amendment, or what's the position on that?
Yeah, well, the bill as currently drafted sets out the functions of the organisation, and sets out that the membership of the council need to have the required skills and expertise in public finance and so on to be able to undertake those duties. All members need to be independent of political influence and competent and have a strong economic background in economics and public finance. So that's the focus in the bill, or in the bill at the moment, and in terms of the membership, the current membership and the membership going forward. The bill also sets out that in terms of membership going forward, that there will be an independent public appointments process for members of the council. So in line with SAPANI guidance and rules around all that. So that would be the process for appointing members.
Okay, thanks, Tony, for that. From what you said there, I don't have the full reference in front of me that you commented on, but to me that sounds like that could apply to somebody in a union or a human rights organisation that could, many do have experts and knowledge on public finances. So yeah, that's useful. Thank you.
Great. So I think, given no other member has indicated that they wish to ask a question, I think this is a watching brief for us. I think there's lots that we could continue to ask, but we will have the opportunity to do so. And obviously we'll also have the opportunity to consider, because we'll be doing detailed scrutiny, and we will have the opportunity to consider amendments both as a committee and as individuals and we will. But this is an important part of our pre-legislative scrutiny. I think members have given a broad view about some of the questions that are going to be asked, and I hope we see more detail on the bill sooner rather than later. I appreciate the update and the candour around that. If anybody else wishes to come in,
just very quickly, Chair. Just maybe the committee would like to be informed through the Chair and the rest of the committee about the progress. We've been told it will be by the end of this calendar year. If there's going to be any sort of delays.
Yes, I think.
Sorry, I'm speaking in some ways as the Deputy Speaker, saying that it's probably because of the weight of the legislative process that there is at the moment, when there isn't any, is sort of raising a few flags.
I think it's fair to say that the Assembly is not overburdened.
We're not overly burdened.
The Assembly is not overburdened with the executive, so it is not. It may well be. There's lots of legislation going in the background, but MLAs ain't seeing it. Certainly, those of us who aren't in ministerial office ain't seeing it.
But that's a valid point, Chair. So where is the backlog? Is it in a DSO office, OLC's office? What does it matter to the Department of Finance if there's 3 bills coming from the Department of Education?
Well, no, there's no backlog that we're dealing with at the moment. Really, it's just we are having to work through the detail of the bill with colleagues in OLC, and we have a good constructive working relationship with them. So, there's no backlog which is delaying us, but it's those points that I've referred to earlier. It's really just making sure that we get some good legislation that has the precision that we need. So we're working through that. But once that's ready, we will be hoping to introduce that as soon as possible. And that's
just to say, just one fact, just so we're absolutely clear. But this, so and for those who weren't in the room at the start, the department says it is still hoping to introduce it as per the legislative programme in this calendar year, but it is not guaranteed that will happen. But it is more confident that it will definitely happen by the end of this financial year, which is the end of March. But to be absolutely clear, understanding the current, because there is a draft bill, there is a bill that is drafted. Is that with a minister at the minute, or is it okay? It isn't with the minister yet. You're back and forth.
We're meeting with the OLC colleagues next week to actually discuss where we are with that.
Is it the OLC have said that they have there's particular bits they want to go through and they want to be absolutely certain about before they? Okay. Well, look, I appreciate your candour on that in the spirit of being constructive. But we obviously want to see it sooner rather than later, and we are in general, I think, as an Assembly, particularly given we promised lots of actions and a legislative programme, which was itself, in my view, relatively modest, but I appreciate that. So we hope to see it sooner rather than later, and I'm sure we'll drag you back and ask you more questions then, and lots of other people too. At this point, thank you very much. Thank you, Tony, Wendy, and Sarah. Tony's staying, I believe.
Yes. Tony doesn't get to go.
He's not allowed to leave.
So,
Take well. Yeah, just as
In folder.
Tuesday was probably about the shortest day I've ever sat in the Assembly.
You were annoyed I didn't get a chance to speak to you.
Just doing nothing.
Okay. Okay, members. The next agenda item, members, is an oral briefing. We're getting a couple. We swap around the names at the top table. We'll give our new witnesses an opportunity to take their seats. So, agenda item 7 is the Public Sector Transformation Board update. At page 392, you will see papers relating to this item. There's a clerk's cover note. There's various other things, including correspondence between the chair of the interim board and the Minister of Finance, detail of the proposals, as well as a breakdown of costings for the proposals across all departments. When we say proposals, we mean proposals from individual departments. There were a total of 47 put forward. We agreed to seek an update on the whittling process, how that's happening. At last week's meeting, members noted that 29 proposals had been selected to move forward to the next stage, 18 of which are categorised as digital and are included within the digital landscape review, and a further 11 that are moving to stage 2 assessment. These were selected from a total of 47, as I said, proposals put forward by departments. Members will recall that they agreed to forward this information to other statutory committees with view to those other committees obtaining briefing from their respective departments on proposals relative to their remits, relevant, I should say, to their remits. And we also agreed to request clarification on whether the proposals going forward were already in progress before being selected by the Transformation Board to move forward, along with a brief summary of each project's expected purpose and aims, as well as the value of each project. We've already requested an oral briefing from the interim board itself. We haven't yet confirmed that. The department has not been able to secure a date from the head of the civil service, who is chair of the interim board, which is in itself interesting. But we understand that we might not have that until mid-October. We do, however, have officials in front of us, including Tony Simpson, who is giving us 2 different briefings today, so we appreciate Tony doing that. Aidan McMahon, who's Director of Fiscal Policy at the Department, and Julianne Kieran, who is Principal Economist at the Strategic Policy Division. If we could have an opening statement, that would be most welcome. Thank you very much.
I'll keep this one brief
Thank
as well.
you. Yes, absolutely. We will have opportunities to ask questions.
Yep, no, thank you, Chair, for the opportunity, as you say, to kind of brief the committee on the progress in the Interim Public Sector Transformation Board. And since we were last here with you, I hope members feel that they've been kept informed of progress in the work of the Interim Board. The Minister and ourselves as officials are keen that we share the latest developments with the committee. So last time we provided an overview of how the board was established and the fund was established. I'll not repeat that. But since we last appeared at the committee, the head of the service, in her capacity of the interim board, has written to the Finance Minister on 3 occasions in July, August and September. And the Minister and Head of Service also met at the end of July in person to discuss progress. So I understand those letters have been shared with the committee.
Just quickly, on the Head of Civil Service being chair of the interim board, that was a decision made with the UK government before restoration?
It was a decision by the Finance Minister, agreed with the Executive, but in consultation with the UK government.
Was that made before or after restoration?
It's after.
After restoration, that Jane Brady would be the chair. Okay.
So those correspondence I referred to set out a number of developments. So I suppose just to kind of touch on those, where the chair of the board, Jane Brady, outlined an opportunity that the board had seen to consider collectively the batch of digital proposals received to allow for a more strategic and system-wide approach to digital transformation. And she had recommended that DOF and TIA work together to develop a terms of reference for a digital landscape review, to flag that, as anticipated, the Interim Board would want to engage directly with departments on the content of proposals to understand them in more depth and provide some feedback ahead of that stage 2 assessment process. And then that brings us to the most recent update, which you've referred to, Chair, where the board had updated the Minister. The 29 proposals have been selected to move forward, having completed its initial stage, 18 of which will be categorised as digital, or were categorised as digital, and will be included within that landscape review, which is not expected to be completed until the end of the year. And then the other remaining 11 of the 29 would move to that stage 2 assessment. The Interim Board has met with the 7 departments responsible for those 11 proposals moving to stage 2 to provide verbal feedback, and those departments are now being asked to submit revised proposals to the Interim Board for final assessment, with a view that advice will be made to the Minister in due course, and then Minister Archibald will then bring her recommendations to the Executive. Separately, just to make members aware that officials in the department have been working alongside counterparts in the NIO to finalise the terms of reference for the Interim Board. And I suppose the last point that I would make is, just despite the busy schedules of the 3 members of the Interim Board, they've met 7 times since it's been established in May, so showing the kind of the commitment that the board have to kind of pushing this important piece of work forward. So with
the board is the head of the civil service to Francis Ruan
and Julie Harrison, the permanent secretary of the NIO.
And so they're the board members.
Yes.
But they're supported by effectively a secretariat, which is led by you, Aidan.
That's correct.
Temporarily. So temporarily, we are supporting the work of the board, but the view is that will be supported directly out of TEO in their kind of reform and delivery unit once that's established. But at the moment, we've been supporting that work in DOF.
Okay, that is helpful. So, just to go back to the overall context, the restoration package included £235 million to specifically, that was new money to specifically fund transformation projects, of that to get that in pursuit of that £235 million. There were about £746 million worth of bids that went in. There are that was a total of 47, which do you know how many there are? Do you know how many you're going to fund in total, or is it not? Have you not got a numerical number that you're definitely going to fund? It's just what's most explain where we are with that.
Yeah, well, the role of the board is to identify those proposals that can considered as being truly transformational, and then to prioritise those and put their recommendations to the finance minister. So there's no decisions that have been taken at this point in terms of the number of proposals, the profile of those. So that's still being considered at the moment. But obviously, the desire is clearly to utilise the full amount of funding available.
So that funding is obviously across a 5-year period. It was initially earmarked at approximately 47 million per year for the 5 years, but obviously we've been discussing that with UK government and the potential for reprofiling of that as needed and as required. But that's how it was set out at the early stage.
Okay, is there a risk that, and just looking at some of the initial proposals that went in, a lot of them seem like BAU, to be perfectly honest, or BAU with a bit of digital added, and in one sense, surely if you are any organisation these days is kind of engaged in particularly through technology, is engaged in a process of, and obviously we are all in the age of people thinking about AI and how that simplifies processes, some in a scary and possibly apocalyptic way, others in a completely sensible and rational way. But in any case, most organisations, public and private, should be thinking about continuous improvement and saving costs, ideally while holding on to your staff, but upskilling your staff, improving processes and improving outcomes for service users on a kind of BAU basis. Is that the same as that's what a lot of this seems like? The Integrate programme was already happening before this transformation. Isn't there a risk that this is simply funding stuff that was going to happen anyway?
Well, Integrate it was treated separately, so it was always the intention was always that if the opportunity to bid for that arose, that this was a generally new and transformational project. But given the need to proceed with that, the decision was taken that would be that positive decision to fund that would be taken, but with the view that that there would always be an application to the transformation pot for that. In terms of
Integrate would happen, but that you're saying there's a decision that Integrate would definitely happen, kind of come what may, because it's such an important project. But that as part of that, they would make a bid.
Yes, because yes. But in terms of the others, I suppose, speaking generally, if you think about efforts to improve services, naturally, departments will be thinking about what they can do to improve service delivery, what new innovative ideas. In many instances in departments, some of those may have been constrained by a lack of budget availability. So will all of these be new ideas that no one had thought of before the transformation programme was put in place? I would suggest not. Some of those may be some new or fresh thinking. Others will be things that departments may not have been able to proceed with, but had identified these are areas where we could transform if funding had been available. There was capacity in the system to do that. So what I would add as well is one of the key aspects of the assessment, if departments have been asked to describe how those proposals differ from current activities, current core functions, BAU as you would describe it. So the key role that the Transformation Board will be assessing those to see, are these genuinely transformational? Will they change how we deliver public services here?
On the terms of reference, we still don't have a final terms of reference. Yeah. Is that because of the UK government, or why is that? Or is that because of lack of political agreement of the executive, or both?
Well, it hasn't gone to the executive, indeed hasn't gone to ministry yet. So as officials, we've been discussing that with colleagues in the Northern Ireland office. As you would expect, following the election, there was a bit of a delay in that while the new government was established. But we've been having recent discussions with them and have a developing document that we would hope to be bringing to the Finance Minister in the first instance for her consideration.
So just to be clear, this isn't like a gotcha, but there is at the minute we have this process is happening, which is whittling stuff down from 47 to a smaller number, which is supposed to be genuinely transformational. The majority technologically enabled in some way, but as of yet, there's no political agreement at the executive, nor is there confirmation from the UK government that that any of these projects will actually fit their terms of reference?
Well, what I would say is, in terms of the...
I'm not saying you shouldn't be doing that,
Yeah.
because clearly you would be far behind the 8 ball if you hadn't done any prep.
No, absolutely. Well, what I would say firstly is, in terms of the executive, obviously met and agreed the finance minister's paper in terms of how to progress transformation on the 9th of May. So the executive are aware of the process that then is unfurling. And in terms of the UK government, obviously Northern Ireland office officials and ourselves are in contact all the time about the work that the board is taking forward. And Julie Harrison, obviously the permanent secretary of the NIO, sits on the board. So they're fully aware of what's going on and what's happening. We obviously need to get, and we've had 2 different governments to deal with in terms of the NIO in that period of time, so we need to get to a point where, yes, we agree the terms of reference, but it's not that anything's being done that anybody's not aware of what is being done over this period of time.
Hasn't been any hold put on this, or pause, to use a very loaded word, over the last couple of weeks from the Treasury or the UK government saying, no, you need to put. So as far as you're concerned, that's okay. Just one other one for me before I bring in committee colleagues, which is the letter from the head of the civil service to Minister Archibald on August 14th says, with your permission, I propose the colleagues in TO and DOF and TO work together to develop terms of reference. Obviously, that's what we've just been discussing about, but also on a digital landscape review, which is sort of a subsidiary part of all this work, as I understand it. I would also suggest that conditional on political agreement, this could signal an important step towards the allocation of funds from the £235 million transformation fund. So it's very clear that she says conditional on political agreement. Now, obviously, ministers get to make decisions on allocations, and that's entirely appropriate. But is there a concern that, and it might be slightly reinforced by the kind of sheer volume and multifarious nature of some of these bids, that it's more likely to be a whole, as sometimes happens with monitoring rounds, a whole load of very little allocations given to please departments because they feel, well, we should get some of that transformation fund for our may or may not be particularly transformational. Might it be better? And I don't know if a bid came in, but clearly, if you were to take, for example, the health service, and I don't know if it's the health service, I don't know what the health service is bid for. Right? I know there are details of it. Well, indeed, but for example, if there's a coherent argument made that the better thing would be to spend the vast majority of this money on one big thing, which is going to completely transform our completely underperforming health service, is that at risk of being undermined by a political argument over allocations within the executive? And tell me, explain to me how that might not happen.
I was just going to... It's maybe, in terms of the point for the digital landscape review, really the reason for political agreement being used in that particular piece of correspondence was actually just to say that if there's any money being spent from the fund, for example, to do this digital landscape review, it will need to make sure that all parties are content that that money would be being spent and taken from the fund to do that particular piece of work, as opposed to thinking about the broader...
There will be political agreement for the fund. So, for example, what I mean is that, and I'm being hypothetical here, there's £235 million. If the health department said, our health service is in a complete mess, we would like to spend 200 million out of that 235 million. This is how we want to invest it. This is the profile of spending. This is what we want to do in terms of technology and workforce. We are saying that the overriding priority for this, I'm not saying this is what should happen, but I'm saying this is, you could theoretically see this happening and saying, we think that it would be the best outcome rather than would be a big shock intervention funded by this fund to address the health service. That's hypothetically, versus a divvied up fund, which is some of which is very noble and worthy and necessary things, but a bit of digital transformation in the justice system, a bit of digital transformation in the education authority, but everyone's got a bit, but there's no real big strategic positive outcome other than a number of allocations made that are by themselves perfectly worthy and sensible, but not the same thing as the big transformational investment in one specific area.
Well, I would suggest that's where the role of the board comes in. So the board will be determining what is generally transformational in their view. They will be putting recommendations to the finance minister around those projects that they consider transformational, and perhaps advice we would expect around how those bids should be prioritised. So we will have very clear independent advice that goes to the Finance Minister and from her then to the Executive. So, you know, there is a different standalone process from this, separate to the normal budgeting process.
Okay, good. And I assume we will get a kind of sight on all that, so we will be able to scrutinise it. Okay, I'm bringing members now. Deputy Chair, first of all.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for coming here today. Much has been said about the interim board and establishing the terms of reference and the time taken to do that. Is there any update on making permanent board appointments, or what sort of timescale will be for that?
Well, that's all. You know, that is part of the discussions that will be happening as in terms of consideration around the final terms of reference. So obviously we have the interim board there at the moment and the membership that they're appointed in doing that work. Once we get agreement around that terms of reference, we'll see what the implications of that are for, if there are any, for membership. Obviously the agreement or the restoration package set out broadly the role of the fund. And the Minister's paper to the Executive set out that where we would have members, how they could draw on the external expertise as needed. So that all needs to be fleshed out as part of the development of the terms of reference.
I just would be concerned that, you know, the word interim means, you know, short term, and, you know, there's a lot of development of a terms of reference for something that's interim. I would be keen to understand, you know, when we'll be moving to the permanent board and who would be representing who on that board, how they would be appointed, and the transparency of that process. So would you have any idea of any sort of timeline?
Not on the timescale. Obviously we're keen to put it in place as quickly as possible, and as colleagues have said, we're working with the NIO on that. And in terms of that kind of framing of it as an interim board, it really just demonstrates that the commitment the Minister, the Finance Minister, had to start the work to deploy this funding as soon as possible. So rather than wait and putting final terms of reference and a permanent board in place, she was keen that we started that work in earnest and move as quickly as we could.
And on the composition of it, so there's just the three individuals there that are on it, and you know, as we're moving forward, I would just be keen to understand. So we've got the head of the civil service on it as chair. Would there be anyone else at any different grades within the civil service being part of the intention to be members of it? Or again, like as you said, the board's going to decide what public sector transformation looks like for Northern Ireland. Should there be more than just the head of the civil service on it? Should there be someone from health trusts from different sectors? Because it's public sector transformation we're talking about here, not just civil service.
At the moment we can't say what the composition of any formal board will look like. But what has been a common theme in discussions and in the Executive paper is that, you know, the board, as it determines it needs to, call on expertise as it needs, be that, you know, academic, be that experts from UK government or other fields. And you're quite right, you know, as we get into looking at particular projects in particular sectors, you know, I would expect that the board would see a real value in bringing in that particular expertise so they can properly and thoroughly scrutinise proposals to make sure that they're going to have the impact that it's suggested in the proposals. But that's all being worked through.
And I was going to say, sorry, just on top of that I think there's an expectation that the current board will be built upon and developed going forward. So it's not almost start again. It's what we have now, but thinking about how that might develop over time. And when we think about the experts, I suppose we didn't know what proposals we would get from departments, so you don't quite know which experts you might need and whether that's health officials or education or something different than that. So that was the rationale and reasoning for going for the three individuals that we currently have at this point in time. But equally, recognising that there was such a large amount of digital proposals that came forward, the 18 proposals that came forward from departments, that's partly the reason why the members took the decision to let's bring in and take a step back and do the landscape review of digital before we then push forward into those proposals in more detail.
And again, it's just to my point and my concerns. I feel like the range of proposals coming in terms of digitisation of the civil service, where the chair of the board's the head of the civil service writing out on that, I'm not surprised that that's the range of those things coming back because of the nature, you know, of that coming through and that civil service head. And again, just to the point, is public sector transformation, and I know you know, the UP have the health department there, and you know, we've a lot of discussion of that, and I know we can bring in independent experts, but I just would be really concerned about the composition of the board, and whenever that terms of reference is coming forward, that there are other people actually sitting on the board that are representative of the other aspects of the public services. Pardon me, in terms of the wider transformation coming through in the programme for government as well, I just wanted to ask, will this public sector transformation board be hand in hand with the transformation unit in the programme for government, or will the two sit separate?
Yes, so the view is that that secretariat function that we're performing at the moment, that will transfer to TEO and be part of that wider kind of transformation reform structures that they're putting in place, and we expect that to be happening very soon. But obviously we will still, just the point to make is the Department of Finance will still have a role in supporting TEO in that, obviously given the nature of the officials we have in the department that, you know, scrutinise, you know, spending proposals, business cases and so on. We have a particular expertise, so the view is that we will still support the Secretariat and the Board in scrutinising proposals and providing advice.
And I know you said that there's been 7 meetings and it's a good investment of time. Is there a budget allocated for the operational functions of the board, or what sort of power status
that's part of the terms of reference discussion. Okay. So in the paper that would have went to the executive on the 9th of May, there was an estimate put within that to say it may be in the range of, but with an expectation that members and ministers will want as much of that money as possible to flow to actual proposals as opposed to the administration of the project. So there is an allocation there, but it's not locked down yet, but will be as part of the terms of reference.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Philip Brett.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for your presentations. So the first meeting of the board was in
May,
and then it's met just
7 times in total.
Just 6 times since its first meeting in May. Okay. In terms of the overall application, so 47 were received. That was around 750 million. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And then 235 million is obviously the budget over the 5 years. So just to break down the 29 then, so of the 18 non-digital projects, how much are they worth?
I don't have the figures at hand, but we can certainly provide those.
And then you wouldn't know then what the 11 digital are worth?
That's the other way right.
So it's 18 digital and 11 through to phase 2.
Yeah, you don't have that breakdown, no, that's fine. Just to follow on the point of the chair made, so the board made the call for projects in May following its first meeting with a closing date of what, 3 or 4 weeks?
Yeah, it was 2 weeks later in June.
2 weeks? Yeah. So just the point that the chair made, that were these not just projects then that had already been sitting there rather than projects that would actually be truly transformational? Or did you believe that departments were making progress on these bids since the restoration package had been sort of discussed in January?
We've long signalled that, you know, post the restoration package that we would need to find a way to allocate this funding, and, you know, we've had discussions with departments in advance of that formal call going out. So it wasn't that this landed on their desk with a 2-week turnaround. They saw the final forms and templates and the criteria that we were seeking to meet, but we've, as I said, long signalled that.
And then in terms of the 11 projects that are moving forward to stage 2, how many are in the Department for Finance?
None are in stage 2, but of course there's the digital side of things, and the majority of projects that came from the Department of Finance were in the digital space, so you would expect that. There's four in the digital.
And was the
side.
Department for Finance, is it the only department then that hasn't made it through to stage 2 of those? TEO. Okay. And do you know how many, in terms of Department of Finance, were put into?
4 into the digital?
No, non-digital.
None.
0.
So you didn't put?
Sorry, what was that?
There was 2 in, but they didn't pass.
So 2 were put in. From
6 in total. 4 went through in digital,
yeah.
and two didn't make it into stage 2, the stage 2 assessment.
And just in terms of the ones that were non-digital that were received, were you surprised at the level or lack of level of those that came forward? So obviously the Department for Health is the one that would spring to mind would need the most transformation. It's something that we're talking about quite regularly. So I see that the Department of Health, only one has made it through to stage 2 at this stage. Had they had further applications that
They
weren't?
they did. So there was another proposal, for example, on mega clinics that didn't make it through to stage 2.
And then, we don't have a terms of reference. Then, what was the auspices or the way in which these decisions were made? So, Department for the Economy, Public Sector Apprenticeships didn't make it through, but something that, in my view is important might not be as important in other people's views or maybe other ones. So, what was the guiding principles then?
And back to the paper that the Finance Minister brought to the Executive on the 9th of May, within that they're set out a broad criteria that would be the objectives for the board and the proposals that they would look at. And then there was a quantitative assessment that was developed by the board working with officials in the Department of Finance that was tailored and added to with a qualitative assessment. And again, the number of meetings that you've alluded to, the 7 since the board was established, lots of that were going through the criteria that was going to be applied to the proposals that were put forward, then assessing them, discussing that with Department of Finance officials for any views that they had before then the board came to their conclusions.
And who had the ultimate say then? Did a recommendation from the board in terms of the shortlisting go to the finance?
No, it's purely the board that is using that imprimatur that they got from the Finance Minister to then make their decisions based on the proposals that they received and what they thought should come through to stage 2. Right. And obviously they've updated the Finance Minister at every stage to let her know what...
Yes, but the Finance Minister is the democratically elected and ultimately accountable minister to the Assembly and to this committee, had no final say in the projects. They were all done by
but obviously the expectation is in time that the transformation board's role and remit will be to assess projects as transformative or not.
Yes.
And then they will ultimately bring advice to the Finance Minister, and ministers will then decide based on those proposals that have come forward and been assessed as being transformative.
So this is a process we're in at the moment with the board. So it's really just the board are updating the Finance Minister as we work through this process, but it has yet to put its final advice and recommendations to the Finance Minister.
And do you then expect? So obviously this was seen as a 5-year project, but this now, although you don't have the figures in front of you, do you imagine that this is now closed to applications and no more may come?
No, absolutely. So this was the first. There isn't. We don't have a firm number of windows that we're going to go through. That hasn't been planned out. Yeah. But the expectation is that there will be further calls for proposals. So this is the first call. The board will make its recommendations, and then there will be decisions as to what funding is made post those. We are engaging with the board, with officials, have engaged with departments that have made it through to this stage to help them shape the proposals and reconsider those. And the intention is that the board and officials will also re-engage with departments that weren't successful to give them that feedback that may be helpful for them in thinking about further applications or proposals that they'll bring forward.
And I know you don't have the figures in front of you, but if we're going to do other windows and open up the applications again, obviously there would need to be quite a bit of funding still left in order to do that. Do you know what the average cost of or each of the bids are? Just trying to work out. So 29 proposals, 235 million, so £8 million obviously per project at this stage. Obviously it's not going to be that.
There's a huge range of proposals and costs that have come forward. So initially when we went out and asked for proposals, we said to departments, you can bring forward 2 proposals which are above 10 million but below 100 million pounds in scale, and you can bring forward 4 proposals in the smaller space which are up to 10 million pounds in scale. But we don't actually know, and the board won't know yet until it gets to that second stage of proposals coming forward, what the quantum of funding being asked for and being sought for is in relation to that. So it's be really difficult to say what might be the allocation or what might be the advice for the allocation this year or into next year, and what that might do across, because some projects might be 1-year projects, other projects can be a 5-year project.
Okay, just to bottom out, I'll bring in Nicola Brogan in 1 second. But what you're saying is that, so the idea that there's a kind of political go no go ultimately on the major, on what gets funded, But effectively, the Public Service Transformation Board, the Public Sector Transformation Board, as it exists now, is kind of making interim decisions because they're ruling things out. So decisions are being made not to proceed with things, but that's fair to say, isn't it? Because things are being ruled off the table.
Yes, but their role is to determine what they consider as being transformational. So at the moment, so they're not making choices. We would rather do that than this, but they're making to say, it's quite a binary. Is this a generally transformational proposal? And then those that they consider to be transformational, they will then suggest a prioritisation of that to the Finance Minister.
Right, okay, but is the Finance Minister, it is going to be theoretically possible for the Finance Minister to say, well, actually that thing, that project for £15 million transformation in X department that you said you ruled out, or you said I want to spend money on that is theoretically possible?
Not through this funding stream.
Okay. So they are making decisions, they are in effect already making decisions about what not to fund.
It's what gets through to the next stage. Yeah, so that's
not to be caught up, but it's wrong to say the interim board is not making decisions. They are making decisions to what is going to be presented. They are making a decision on what gets prioritised and put before the ministers. I'm not saying that's wrong or right, but I just think it's important to clarify that. Nicola Brogan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you again for your presentation there. Listen, a lot of what I wanted to ask has been covered already, but I would like to know what kind of engagement you have had and the interim board has had with departments around their proposals. And for those that were unsuccessful at this stage, I wanted to ask if they would be able to bid again, so it's good to hear that they can. I suppose, have they received feedback on the issues or why they didn't meet the criteria this time round? And do you expect them to kind of tweak that there and bring that forward again? Or from the engagement you've had with the departments, what's your synopsis of that?
Yeah, well, I'll let Aidan maybe come in, Mum, because he's been involved directly in those discussions. But yes, there's been quite significant engagement with departments around at this stage around the proposals that have made it through to that second stage, where the interim board are giving their view and advice as to where they might need to kind of consider how those proposals could be better framed. We haven't had discussions yet with departments that have been unsuccessful, but the intention is to do that, to then better place them to bring forward proposals in the future. And it will be for those departments to decide, do they bring forward the same proposal, reframed, recast in a different way, or we would hope as well that the feedback that they get will help them bring forward any other proposals that they may consider in the future. But maybe, Aidan, if you want to give a bit of a flavour of the discussions we've had today.
Yeah, no, it's been a really valuable process, I think, both for members of the board as well as departments. I met with departments after the board made their final assessment of proposals they thought would go through to stage 2, those that would be digital and those that wouldn't be taken forward at this point in time. I met with departments the following week to go through with departments that were through to the next stage to say, and this is what the board's view is of your proposal, and try and give them some feedback so that they were fully aware of what that was. With a view that then the board members and the board met departments last Thursday, almost come in, the departments come in, they pitched their proposal again to the board members. There was then an in-depth discussion on each of the proposals. Half an hour was set aside for each of those proposals to have a Q&A session and so that the board members could understand the proposal in more detail and that any questions or queries they might have had could be answered by the department. So I think that was really useful and really fruitful for both departments and board.
Was that just with the 3 board members? And
I would have been there as well, and so the Secretary would have been supporting the board there in that meeting. So we would have went through and spent a full day with 11 proposals back to back and went through and give them sort of good question and answer session, and so that both parties were fully aware of what the content of the proposal was. Following that, then the board had a further wash-up session the next day for 2 hours where they kind of solidified their view of a particular proposal that was through to the next, so one of the 11. And then I met with the departments again yesterday to give them that real firm steer of what the board thought about their proposal before they resubmit to stage 2. So you'll see in the head of the civil service letters to the finance minister where she said she would want to meet with departments, that she would sometimes want to take a more nuanced view of some of the proposals.
14th of August letter?
It's either I think it's maybe in the 14th of August letter, and maybe the one subsequent to that as well, Chair. But she wanted to take a slightly more nuanced view, and so some of the feedback, for example, to departments might be, you know, the concept was really sound and really liked it, but you're asking for a lot of money here, and perhaps there needs to be something done in this pilot space first before, and so maybe you need to lay the groundwork on what your proposal is before you maybe come back in a later round with something more significant, more substantive. So it's been a really dynamic sort of process that's gone on between the board and departments, but I think and I hope that will lead to stronger departmental bids and proposals at the end of the day.
I suppose there is a learning curve for both sides, isn't there? Like if it is
Absolutely,
anything.
and I was just on your point, and I think Tony alluded to in terms of the departments that haven't been successful at this point in time. We will absolutely pick that up. But given the pace that we're trying to do this and go through this process we haven't been able to do that at this point in time.
Okay, and on those 11 proposals that have been that have got to stage 2, what's the timeline for them now then? So you've had those meetings this week and or right up to Thursday last week. What are the next steps and what's the timeline like?
So the feedback that I was given yesterday and what the board decided at their wash up on Thursday of last week is that they will be reissuing a pro forma for departments to repopulate and send back in post the feedback that they've now received, and that's probably going to issue this week with a turnaround time of about 3 weeks to complete.
I think that's everything. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Steve Aiken.
Yeah, thanks very much, Lee. Thanks very much for your remarks so far, Tim. Just to get this right, so the plan is for the interim Public Sector Transformation Board, which has the permanent secretary from the Northern Ireland office in it. That's going to be rolled through the TEO into a Public Sector Transformation Board. Plus, it's going to link in with the transformation unit in the TEO.
Well, it's the secretary, so the secretariat function for the board will be
that will be
move
at the
to TEO.
TEO. So in effect, and just get me right, so that means that the head of the NIO will now sit in board.
No, so I was going to say, so the obviously TEO are still working out the structure for reform and transformation, and there's referenced in the programme for government. There will be different elements of what that is, but an element of it will be in relation to the £235 million. And so that specific element will be serviced, if you like, by the TEO civil servants that are there. But it's not that Julie Harrison is in TEO in any way, shape or form.
She will be still a member of that board. Or
but it's not
the NIO nominate.
It's not of any wider reform and transformation arrangement in TEO. It's as specifically in relation to the 235, which obviously is part of the UK government funding package for the restored executive.
But we still haven't yet formalised the terms of reference, so we don't know how it's going to look.
Well, we have a very good idea because there's a terms of reference in the background that need to be finalised, and all parties are being brought along in that process. And that's a terms of reference for the 235 fund as opposed to broader and wider.
So the NIO's influence will end when the 235 fund has been spent.
Well, I think if you look at some of the political agreements and the interim fiscal framework, for example, it will say that, for example, if Northern Ireland ministers, if the health minister, for example, wanted to ask the board to do something for him, then he can do that if he wishes. But that's for Northern Ireland ministers to dictate if they wish that to happen or not.
So it's not the NIO being brought into the centre.
No.
For a bit. Okay, thanks, Chair.
I think that I think this is an important point. I think it's factually true to say that the Permanent Secretary of the Northern Ireland Office is involved in a process of deciding where the prioritisation of agreed executive funding that is happening at the minute. I don't think that's not a controversial statement.
Well,
deciding what's not.
Yeah. So if you think, I suppose, with respect, that's a family decision.
Well done, Ian. That's a good civil service answer.
If you think the role of the board is as a filter. So the role of the board is to determine of the projects coming through what are generally transformational and to sift out those that, as you would describe it, are BAU. But decisions in terms of what is funded from those that are determined to be truly transformational will be taken by ministers of the executive.
Indeed, but they will take those decisions on the basis of what has been filtered out. The filtration, Julie Harrison is not there as part of the filtration mechanism because she was previously, for example, a permanent secretary of the Department of Infrastructure. I presume it is in some kind of ex officio way because she's permanent secretary of the Northern Ireland office. So that has clearly been agreed at a political level, but it is a thing that is happening at the minute. So I think it's just important just to be clear about that on the record. And it may be that changes in some updated or finalised terms of reference, but that is what's happening at the minute. The MIO Perm Sec is effectively saying, or part of saying, go, no go to specific spending decisions on behalf of the executive, and that's what's been agreed.
So just to come in slightly there, Chair. Maybe it might be useful when the terms of reference have been finally agreed that we get that bottomed out, because that's an important.
We should get that bottomed out. And I think we should just have, because it's something that's been agreed. Is it? Did you? I'm going to bring your colleague in now, but did you want to?
Colleagues first, to just a further question.
Okay, all through.
Yeah. So out of the 235 million that this board has to distribute, how much has already been spent on administration?
None from the 235 at the moment. So the board, the secretariat function is being provided by Department of Finance. Mm-hmm. So there hasn't been any yet. Obviously, the next stage will be to consider whether or not or how to fund the digital transfer or the digital landscape review. Yes. But at the moment, that's all being delivered by officials from the department.
And there's no funding stream or no amount paid for yet, or no cost built up, accrued yet?
As I say, we've been doing that in addition to wider duties that we have in the department, so no. But we will need to seek agreement on how we fund that digital landscape review.
And there is an expectation, obviously, we already discussed that there will be an administrative element that will need to be accommodated, particularly if this is a scheme that runs for 5 years. But that's caught up in the terms of reference discussions in terms of locking down what exactly that will be.
Given aside all the political arrangements and decisions that have been taken thus far, 235 million over 5 years isn't a lot of money. Are we sure that the model and apparatus that we're entered into is going to be value for money?
Well, I suppose the terms of reference are being agreed on both sides. The proposals that are being put forward by departments, for those that are successful, they will have to have completed a business case that shows that it was value for money. At the individual departmental level, we haven't asked departments to complete business cases at this point in time, because obviously we didn't want 47 business cases being completed for lots of projects that weren't necessarily going to be funded.
Surely business case must be produced in order to justify the spend in any budget cycle. So, we're not spending money willy-nilly in departments outside of this transformation. Most departments should be looking at transformation anyway. And surely it's a matter of timing with regards to this. I'll give you an example. So you have the health budget, or the health ministry, which I would argue has been run atrociously badly in the last number of years. But imagine the health department decides that they're going to administer a new scheme called Encompass. That would be transformational. But Encompass isn't involved in this at all, probably because of a timing issue, because they're already rolling that out. So is there an occasion where a department can say, look, we have transformed mightily well 2 years ago, and now we're not being able to avail of this money? Is there a chance that a department could retrospectively bid for money?
No, there's no suggestion of that at all. And as you've said, 200 in the scale of the transformation challenge that are facing public services in Northern Ireland, it's not enough to address all the challenges that we face. So there will be plenty of opportunities in departments, I would suspect, that they would see for new projects to take forward transformational activities. So yes, no, there's no suggestion that we would be looking to retrospectively fund something that's already happened.
I'm going to stick to the Department of Health because it's something that's dear to me. Encompass is being rolled out within its trusts, and they're not all there yet. So why didn't the Northern Trust avail of this funding?
Well, the department was given, all departments were given the same opportunity, so the criteria that were set out for funding, all departments were given the opportunity to put proposals forward, and the Department of Health itself took the decisions to put forward those proposals that it wanted to apply for funding. So it was a decision for the Department for Health what it submitted to the Transformation Board for consideration.
In the parameters of only 6 proposals that they could submit, and only 2 of them being large, over 10 million, so maybe it just wasn't a high enough priority for them.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay, Philip Brett.
I just wanted to check one last thing. So, if I'm quoting you correctly, you described the role of the board on the applications as a sifting exercise.
Yes, so it's to determine what is generally transformational, and then to provide advice to the Finance Minister, and I expect that the board will give advice as to how they may see the prioritisation of those. So yes, so both.
I was just looking at the letter on the 14th to the Finance Minister, page 2, third paragraph. The Interims Board early view that some proposals may benefit from being taken forward on a smaller scale. Does that not move from being a sifting exercise to them trying to then shape a proposal and decide on a proposal, rather than simply saying this moves forward, this doesn't? That role seems to be increased at this stage in that level.
Well, trying to give advice to departments, so they're saying there's clearly something in a proposal that it may see, but trying to kind of help the department define what might fly, for want of a better description, as a generally transformational proposal. There may be some elements of a proposal that, on a narrower scale, could be seen as generally transformational. So they're providing advice to departments as to how they may reconsider. So I think, without wanting to speak for the board too much, but they're trying to be as helpful as possible to departments in engaging with them, so it's not a blind, you didn't get straight over the line there, but perhaps if there's a good proposal there, they're giving that advice as to how that could be framed in a way that the transformational aspects of that can be brought to the fore.
So of the 11, in the view of the board, which ones need to be taken forward on a smaller scale?
That's probably not for us to share at this point in time, I would suggest. But
you weren't in the meetings.
I was in the meetings, but obviously the board, and we will have fed back to the departments, and then actually it's for the departments then to decide, because ultimately it is their proposal. So the board will have given some constructive feedback, and then but ultimately it's for the departments to decide how they think they want to re-pitch in at the stage 2 process. So
that the chair of the board has said in writing to the Finance Minister that in the view of the board, some of these projects should be taken forward on a smaller scale. Are you not able to articulate what the view of the board is?
I think it wouldn't be appropriate or premature for us to give, I suppose, a commentary on a proposal that's still in development. So we don't have, if the board have invited the department to reconsider how it frames that proposal, I think it'd be more appropriate for us to wait until the department give the department the opportunity to do that, rather than comment on a proposal that's still in development effectively in the department.
You can't tell us which proposals they asked to be or advised to be reworked?
I don't have that information in front of me, no.
Thank you. Just before we release you, the various updates we have, so the Minister, the letter from Jane Brady to the Minister on the 14th of August, and there's been a subsequent letter from Jane Brady to the Minister, is there, or is that the last correspondence?
There was other correspondence, I think, in the 9th of September, and then the committee should have got an update post that.
Yeah, we have got an update from the DAL.
We don't have the original letter.
If we haven't got the original, does the original letter from the Jane Brady mention the broader context of the Reform and Transformation Unit, or indeed the reform package?
I'm pretty sure it doesn't.
No. I ask because there's this plank of the programme for government, which is what is called a broader reform package and Reform and Transformation Unit, but it doesn't really seem to be in the documentation we have received. It says in the programme for government says the central component of the package, i.e. the reform package, will be what we've been discussing today, a new public sector transformation board, through which £235 million will be invested from the transformation fund. But none of the, as it were, documentation we've received about the PSTB mentions a broader reform package or the Reform and Transformation Unit. So I'm just wondering, how do these things go together? I suppose a sceptic might say some of the language about the reform package might have been a bit more last minute than the work on the PSTB, but maybe that's being unfair. I'm just wondering how they link in.
Well, the focus of correspondence from the chair is on the deployment of that 235 million there'll be working consideration, which I'm not involved in, separately in TEO, thinking about how those structures, those wider structures are put in place, and how the inter-board might sit, or the secretariating of that of the board might sit within that. But that's
okay. So the Reform and Transformation Unit is going to be set up within TEO?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's correct.
And at a certain point, the work of the board will migrate to TEO, or it will become, there will be a dotted line, or
it's secretariat functions.
The secretariat function.
Yes. So at the moment, Aidan and his team are providing that secretariat support.
Yeah.
But that will then shift to TEO. Will provide that secretariat support, and as I think I said to colleagues, we will then still provide a supporting role to the secretariat in terms of helping them in assessing and scrutinising bids.
You're not worried about the DOF, like all finance departments, like to have a close rein on spending decisions, and that is literally the raison d'etre of the department. Are you not worried about farming out, power or influence over funding decisions to the executive office?
Well, it's our role is to support the inter-board. It's the board that is providing the advice to the finance minister, and I suppose the key thing is to ensure that the board has the right advice and support that it gets.
Do you think TEO will also be able to give the right advice, the same kind of right advice and support that your department can?
We will be supporting them as they need to. So,
okay. I think so. I guess we will be hearing more about as we hear more about the overall reform package and the work of the Reform and Transformation Unit. We will hear more about how that's going to link up with the board. Is that right? And the fund.
That wouldn't be unexpected.
Okay. I suppose my slight worry is that this reform strand has been put into the programme for government, and it seems like the main pillar of it is the work of the PSTB, but there isn't clarity yet on how that's going to be operationalised at an official level. So I suppose we will have to keep our eye on that. But unless there are any other questions, we appreciate coming and giving us the update. Clearly a lot of work going on, and obviously you'll appreciate our questions are meant in the spirit of being robust but constructive and asking those questions. So we look forward to hearing more, and please keep us posted. I think it would also be helpful to see if we could the updated letter from the Hawks and from the 9th of September, because we have the 14th of August one, but I don't think we have the September one, so it would be helpful to see that if it's possible. It's referenced, but we don't have the original letter.
I think you mightn't have got the actual letter, but the last update provided the update based on the letter, which was the selection of
it would be helpful
so
just to see the letter, because we're nosy. Put it that way, but it's our job to be nosy. So anyway, but thank you very much, and Tony, thank you for sitting through 2 evidence sessions. You can have you're owed a strong drink or a long bath tonight. Thank you very much.
Both.
What's that? Both. Well, nothing for me to say, although I just did. Right. Thank you. Next.
This just throwing this out there. So does this mean? I'm just trying to think where this direction of travel this is going to. Does this mean that all the sort of future discretionary funds ends up in the TEO, whatever transformation board thing? So stuff that's outside where the...
I was going to suggest an action. I think it would be helpful for us.
Yeah.
Because I did ask that question. I didn't get complete clarity on that. It might be because they haven't going to get... I think it would be helpful for us to get a sense from the department about how those fit together, the reform unit, what is called the reform package, but Deputy Chair wants to.
Yeah, and also I do feel really strongly about clarity on how long this interim is going to be interim. Like if you're having a board, I need to see terms of reference of a board, not extensive effort to make terms of reference for an interim board, and then is there going to be terms of reference for a new board? And I feel like the composition of it, who it's going to include, needs to be approved and recruited transparently. I think it should have representatives from health bodies, from economy representatives, from schools, from Bumpany community sector, to say public sector transformation, how the public sector actually does business. It's not just 3 civil servant representatives. So I feel like
I think we should get that. We can definitely get a push for that update. I think timing wise on the if people are content with those things. Phil.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure that they agreed there to share that letter of the 9th of September, so I think if we formally ask for that, it's just language, and those letters are important, and I do have concern about the letter that has been sent on the 14th, because I think this board has moved from a sifting exercise to now trying to as a decision-making function.
It is clearly a decision-making function. You can't pretend that like sifting is a decision. You're not a kind of. We aren't dealing with senior people, including the Permanent Secretary of the Northern Ireland Office and the head of the Civil Service. They are not human sieves who are there to simply filtrate. The filtration has to imply some level of decision-making and executive function. So I think it's slightly. A wee tiny bit insulting to imply that there's no decision making is happening when it is, but I think we'll ask those questions to the department. People are content. We'll move on to the next agenda item, which is an oral briefing on the related subject of the budget sustainability plan outline. Members of page 506 of the meeting pack. Sorry, with agenda item 8. Apologies, we're doing it. I've jumped ahead. We've got so many. Hello there. We've got so many oral briefings today. This one is on city and region growth deals, subject a lot of us have been talking about over the last couple of weeks. Page 491 of the meeting pack is Clark's memo and relevant papers, including the Minister's written ministerial of the 18th of September, the oral statement of 16th of September, departmental update paper issued on the 13th of September, and people will have been people will be aware of all of this. If you aren't aware of the developments, then you aren't doing your job on this committee, but I'm sure everyone is. So we welcome to the meeting Gillian Gilmore, who's Director of Public Spending Directorate in the department and is effectively lead official on some of these things, and also Jason Beggs, Deputy Principal on City and Growth Deals. So official members, these are two officials are here to give us the most up-to-date position in relation to developments. At last week's meeting, we agreed to write to the Minister of Finance, Chief Secretary of the Treasury and Secretary of State for Northern Ireland to reflect the committee's position on the developments around the pausing of City and Growth Deal funding. So if the officials want to give us a brief opening statement and update, that would be helpful.
If I may, just Public Spending Director is Joanne McBurney. Not sure I would want Joanne's job, so just for clarity.
I would get I imagine, apologies, that's just a typo in our...
Director of City and Growth Deals.
McBurney, I do not want to give her the wrong side either.
No.
It's just, it comes, that we take whatever comes down the drop down of our system, so that's...
It's totally innocent. Don't worry, the minutes will be reflected.
For City and Growth Deals, yeah.
The minutes will be updated.
Thanking you. So yes, thank you very much for having me here again to brief you on City and Growth Deals and introduce my colleague Jason Beggs. So Jason works alongside me in our small team. Jason would lead on 2 out of the 4 deals, so Belfast Region City deal and the Causeway Coast and Glens Growth deal, and then Jason would take some responsibility of the high level of risk, so looking at the risk register at a programme level. And Jason would chair a subgroup with the 6 departments that are involved in this around the risk as well. So there's that, cross-working across the different government departments. So look, I know Joanne had briefed you quite extensively last week on the issue of the Treasury pause. Sorry that I wasn't able to make it last week. I was out with the Finance Minister and other prior engagements, and I think Joanne had mentioned that to you last week. So you did cover the issue of the pause last week and the events leading up to that. So I don't propose to go over to that, but if you would like an update on what has happened since, that might just be helpful. Yeah.
I think particularly on the ones that are currently paused.
Yes.
Still remain paused, mid-South Ulster and
Mid-South West and the Causeway Coast and Glens. So the 2 growth deals, which is what the deals are saying, this feels very much like a city versus a rural issue, and Treasury are saying, well, it's not actually, it's got more to do with the stage that they're at in the process. And I must say that the 2 growth deals aren't impressed actually with that narrative, because it was the UK government that had announced the funding for these deals, and then the executive come along and match funded it. So it really was down to when they announced it, and the Belfast Region City deal and the Derry City and Strabane City deal was announced before that. So they're not far behind. It's just a different time frame, if you know what I mean. So look, yes, last Wednesday, the reason I wasn't here, I was up in Derry because the Derry City and Strabane District Council, thankfully, the deal was signed. Real great celebratory event in the Guildhall, and it's fantastic to see them getting that after the roller coaster weekend that they'd had. At that event, the Finance Minister had used her speech to put the 2 growth deals back in the spotlight, as did FMDFM, the Mayor and some other politicians as well. Then that afternoon, on the Wednesday, the Finance Minister had issued a written ministerial statement, which I think, Chair, you just referred to. There was also a partnership panel last Wednesday afternoon, and I'd gone along with the Finance Minister to that. just again unanimous support from all of the stakeholders there, and calling for this UKG pause to be lifted, and all the councils in Nilga were at that, so that unanimous support once again. And you may have noticed in the media and the press that the two city deals, so Belfast Region and Derry and Strabane, they've issued public statements and they're calling for the pause. So you can see right across the political spectrum, across the deals, across a number of stakeholders, there's unanimous support. So I think I'd mentioned already then that the reasoning that from Treasury that the paused was the stage that they're at, and just to flag that the two growth deals aren't really content with that messaging, because it's not that they're behind. So much work has gone on with those two growth deals. They have had strategic outline cases approved for all of their projects. Causeway Coast and Glens had signed its heads of terms in April, and Mid South West was actually due to sign its heads of terms. An event has been planned, the venue was booked, and that was coming up mid-October.
Have they just said they're further behind, or have they given a more specific accounting reason or not?
So, Chair, I think Joanne had explained to you last week. The email came in on the Wednesday.
This was from in the devolved spending team at the Treasury?
From an official.
Yeah.
It came in to all members of the delivery board, so ourselves and DOF, NIO at the same time. Apparently they had no heads up, and the other departments that are involved in the delivery board, and it said that all city and growth deal funding was paused. So then came the scramble. Finance Minister was over in London the next day trying to get that reversed and get some clarity on it.
Were any city and group, presumably there are some, and I know most of the English ones are further ahead, have been further ahead. Are there any ones that, for example, in the north of England or places like that, have also been paused?
We understand that there's one in Scotland. And
one in Scotland?
Yes, and some in England. We're trying to get clarity on those. We're asking NIO, we're asking Treasury, we still are yet to receive some information about which deals across the water are actually paused. So there's a wee bit of confusion and again, not very much clarity on that. So it would be good to understand that. We have asked the question and, we're chasing on that. And the growth deals themselves are very keen to find out what other deals across the water are affected, because, safety in numbers, and they can make the case collectively.
Well, shouldn't we know, as a general question, are they not, if others are paused, do they know something we don't in terms of why they're not up in arms, or don't appear to be up in arms? Maybe we're not following local news in Scotland or north of England or wherever. Maybe they are.
I don't know. Maybe I'm saying too much.
Sure.
I think why this came to a head in Northern Ireland is because the Derry deal was about to be signed the next week, and we were seeking UKG approval to do that because this is a joint initiative between the two governments. So I don't know, is that why it came to light here? Apart from that, Chair, I don't have any further information. As I say, we are chasing and trying to press them to get that.
Okay.
So you look, all the points that I'd mentioned, the Finance Minister's made this very clear in writing and in a virtual meeting with the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, and we're continuing to work with the NIO and the two growth deals. Treasury have said that they need the evidence now to say why this is value for money, why these should go ahead. So we're going to work with the two growth deals and the NIO to provide that evidence. The Labour government's talking about, the growth mission, etc. So we're putting all that to them and looking at the actual projects that are being paused. So there's a bit of evidence need to be gathered. Treasury has committed to providing clarity on what they're actually looking for, so that will be helpful when we're pulling all of that information together. Just FYI as well, the Finance Minister had written to the Federation of Small Businesses, the NI Chamber of Commerce, CBI, Institute of Directors and Manufacturing NI regarding support. So we're hoping to garner a wee bit more support there too across business trade organisations. And then on Monday past, the Minister had invited the growth deals to Parliament buildings, so the Chief Executives and their elected members in the councils. So she was updating them personally on the progress over the past week, and there was PR and photos done on the front of the steps. Was well picked up in the media. And just once again, it's that positive signal, isn't it, just to have such strong, collaborative, unanimous support across political parties. Finance Minister's committed to do everything in their power to get this decision reversed. We don't believe it will happen before the end of October at the outcome of the spending review, but we're still continuing to lift for the immediate pause.
Okay.
So that's on the Treasury pause issue. So, I mean, I'm happy to take questions on that. I know you were asking a few there as well, but I understand you want me here today to talk about progress on the deals.
Yes, that would be good. So if you want to give us that, and then we'll come back and we'll take questions on everything, as it were.
So, yes, before I give you an overview, I wanted to mention I've been in touch with the 4 deals, and if the committee is in agreement, I actually think it would be a really good idea to bring them in and give you an evidence session, you know, just directly.
Sure, well, we can
mouth.
discuss that. We will discuss that afterwards. Yeah.
Okay. So at a deal level, progress on each of the deals. So Belfast Region City deal, there's 19 plus projects. Some of those projects are programmes. So you have 19 overarching projects. Some of them are programmes and will have individual OBCs. So when we're doing the report, sometimes you'll see a higher number than 19, and that's to account for those other OBCs. So Belfast Region City deals well into the delivery phase. There's 12 legally binding contracts for funding. They've been signed, and there's a further 3 contracts expected to be signed this financial year. Planning permission has been granted for 2 of the projects. That's iReach and AMIC. So are you familiar with those? Yes.
Oh, yes.
Construction has started on AMIC up in Newtownabbey. In August, there was an annual conversation which took place. So this is a senior level discussion. So the chief executives, the university seniors involved in Belfast Region City deal, and the permanent secretaries, and it's chaired by the delivery board co-chairs. So that's Joanne McBurney and NIO. The reason for having that is to look at progress from the previous year and then to have a forward look in the year ahead. This meeting in August was extremely positive. Excellent progress was being reported, and there was an update on additional funding that's starting to be brought in as a result of the deal. So that's exactly what the deals were designed to do, to bring additional funding in and increase that investment. And I guess that's what Treasury, you know, the kind of information Treasury is going to be looking for when it's considering the 2 growth deals. Following this reporting mechanism, Belfast Region City deal will publish an annual report, so that's due next month. I think the last time I was here, I had covered the funding, but I'll do an overview anyway. In the 22-23 financial year, 3.06 million was spent across 5 projects. In the 23-24 financial year, 5.36 million was spent across 7 projects. And in the 24-25 financial year, 48.41 million, of which 39.51 is the UKG contribution, is anticipated to be spent across 17 projects in the Belfast Region City deal. At the start of the year, when we were looking at the budget for city and growth deals, we didn't want to overly anticipate what might be spent, because then there's the issue of potential underspend from what we're bringing down from Treasury. So I had advised Treasury back in March that we may be in a position around October monitoring that will bring down more at SUPs, and it's looking like we might need an extra 587,000. So that demonstrates the progress is actually happening and the spend's occurring. So if we move on to Derry. So as you know, the Derry City and Strabane District Council City deal was signed last Wednesday. This will now enable funding to flow. So there are 9 plus projects in that deal as well, and same as Belfast, some of the projects are programme level, so you have individual OBCs. The council now is working with departments to develop the legally binding contracts for funding. So I said to you before, I think the report in May, we had agreed a template contract for funding. So it's really just looking at the project specific information and milestones and stuff. So the bulk of that's already done. That shouldn't be a long process. And the one that is nearly at the final stages, so the one that will be first to be signed, is CADRIC. And that's the Cognitive, Analytic and Digital Robotics Innovation Centre. Detailed design work will now begin on these projects, followed by full business cases, and then they'll get into the on-ground delivery, so procurement, construction, etc. So again, funding 23-24, there was 0.9 million was drawn down for the Derry North Atlantic Museum. It's funded by the Inclusive Future Fund Executives contribution. And for 24-25, we'd anticipated 0.72 million to be spent on the Derry and Strabane, and again, that's in the Derry North Atlantic Museum. So again, we hadn't overly anticipated not being sure exactly when the deal was going to be signed, etc. And we don't think there'll be too much money spent in this financial year. But again, we'd already flagged the Treasury. If we needed more, we can do it at the subs. So on the Causeway Coast and Glens deal then, it is 9 projects. It had signed its heads of terms on the 24th of April, and it had already begun preparing the outline business cases for all of its projects. So it had contracted consultants to start writing those, and they're in that tricky position now. What do we do? You know exactly what are we doing right now. The strategic outline cases had been approved. Now the event that had happened on Monday, where the growth deals had come up, you may have heard the Causeway Coast and Glens Chief Executive, David Jackson, speaking in Parliament buildings, and he had told the press about this £30 million of private sector investment that was due. That's massive, that's really big. And, you know, it's just to stress that is how far advanced some of these projects are. You know, these aren't just notions and something that they might do in the future. There were plans in place to develop these. And one example that Causeway Coast and Glens was really keen that I share with you today is the private sector partnership that they'd been exploring is with a company called Amgen Incorporated. So this company had recently submitted a letter of support. It's a multinational biopharmaceutical company. It has headquarters in California. The company employs about 27,000 staff globally. It has facilities in the US and in over 54 other countries, including the UK and Ireland. In 2023, it had a total revenue of $28.2 billion and spent $4.8 billion on research and development. And this company had been over visiting one of the projects in Causeway Coast and Glens, so it's the Centre for Drug Discovery in UU's Coleraine campus. This company came over, visited them, sent them a letter of support for the growth deal and for this particular project, applauding its forward-thinking nature and praising the valuable resource that this centre would be for the SME and the companies within this sector. And it stated in the letter that it was looking forward to engaging with the centre to create a mutually beneficial working relationship. And again, just stressing that is huge, and that's exactly what these deals were planning to do. And that's one of the projects that's now in jeopardy with this pause.
Great. I think we'll probably move on to questions if you're, unless there's any other vital details.
Southwest, I think it'd be fair to finish that off.
Sure.
Sorry,
yeah, well, we obviously
we'll
do some of it, but can you get into questions? But go on ahead, give us some of the headlines.
Just Chairman, Southwest was preparing to sign its heads of terms and event had been planned for mid-October. Like Causeway Coast and Glens, it had the strategic outline cases approved for its projects. There's 12 projects in total. A lot of work again has been going into that. Some really exciting projects in the UKG funded space, many around green growth. There was private sector involvement there, and there was potential to bring in significant private sector investment. Because, we'll go on to questions, that deal hadn't technically reached its heads of terms, so technically the projects haven't been agreed just yet, so there is that process, that's when heads of terms come. So I won't feel comfortable getting into the detail of those because they haven't actually been announced.
Is it fair to say that, well, obviously members indicate that the bits, so I mean I think there's broad-based agreement objecting to what the UK government have done and the way they've handled it. Is it fair to say that when they first contacted you, it was like just a bolt from the blue, and it was there was no warning at all? There was no indication at all that this was as part of a spending review process they were going to pause? None whatsoever. And it was, am I right in saying it was a Wednesday afternoon, just sort of like a bit of a clear blue sky, as it were?
Wednesday morning, quarter to 11.
Yeah, very good. You obviously remember. Now, did you ask them to explain the word pause? Yes. Because I think a lot of this comes down to the definition of the word pause. Have you asked them, pause doesn't mean this isn't happening, it means don't spend any more money. But in none of these are you actually at the point apart from some of the further where money's about to so go ahead, you explain to me what they told you about pause.
The email came in saying all city and growth deal funding was paused until further consideration under the spending review. So
literally like a 2-line email.
It was about 2 paragraphs. So, and the reason that they were emailing us is because we had been chasing them. So this so they hadn't ever they didn't proactively reach out to you to tell you this? No. We had been chasing them to make sure that they were going to be at the delivery board that afternoon, because the Derry City and Strabane District Council deal was to be signed the following week, and we needed UKG approval to do so, and Treasury had yet to give us that approval as a member of the delivery board. So we know that UKG does this process called a right round, so it's a bit like us going to seek executive approval. So whatever minister's over the policy, they'll do the right round around the other cabinet ministers, and they have to sign it off. And we knew that NIO hadn't done that yet. A few months prior to that, we had tried...
NIO had not done a right round to secure agreement to progress signing the Derry City and Strabane deal.
They hadn't done that yet, and we knew that, but we
and it was specifically for Derry City and Strabane, they hadn't done the right round.
Yes.
And it was NIO that was due to do, because NIO had the responsibility for doing the right round, but they hadn't done it.
But it's not that I'm apportioning blame to them.
They
were told by Treasury that they were seeking advice from ministers, and that not to do their right round yet. This was my understanding, that not to do the right round yet until they get the advice from the ministers.
Okay.
So, but at none of that stage had we known anything about a pause or spending review.
Treasury officials told NIO officials, hold on this. We need to get approval from Treasury ministers.
Yes, so they, at early summer, they were saying the inherited funding that we'd got from the Conservative government, we need ministers to look over this. But again, when I was chasing them, because through the delivery board we were sending emails, I had wanted to get executive approval of the Derry and Strabane City deal before recess. So I had been pushing them early summer, and they were saying, well look, there's a general election coming up here, so they had put that off, which I understood. And then again I started chasing them in July, because I was thinking, well, I want my paper up to the executive for when it comes back from recess. And they were saying, look, we're a wee bit behind because it's new government and we're looking at all these different things, we won't be in a position to email you soon. But there was nothing about a spending review or anything other than this is just a backlog of having a new government.
So just a few things unpacked process wise then. So this was not, so far as you were not the recipient of a pro forma email. It's also right to say that all executive spending on city and growth deals is capex.
Yes.
It's all CDL. So there was no right round in general saying allocated but uncommitted CDL is, or whatever way everyone's committed but unallocated, whichever way round it should be, is hereby frozen. This was something that was communicated to you after you chased for confirmation. Do you know whether, so we've just actually, our committee colleague Dr. Aiken flagged in our committee WhatsApp group that Argyll and Bute in the west of Scotland is in a similar situation.
Okay, that's good to know.
Now, are you aware that they have had, it doesn't look like from so some of the quotes from that local council and indeed the Scottish Government don't look as alarmed that it isn't going to be confirmed. So would it be helpful to understand what if they have had some communication, perhaps we could understand what they've had, and if there are others in the north of England or wherever else.
Absolutely.
Okay. Secondly, just on where we are going forward, so you were told that we had the weekend where I certainly know my party leader and Derry MP, and I know the Minister Archibald and others were making urgent representations, and this was via the NIO and the Treasury, and this was to an extent resolved relatively quickly, which I think underlines a sense that this was quite a large cock-up, if not full conspiracy to... what exactly have you heard now about, what is the precise communication about? Have you had any more detail about why they're still pausing the other two?
So, official level communication, as you say, over the weekend, Minister Archibald had been in touch with Hilary Bain.
Yeah.
The Minister had written a letter on Thursday evening to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, and still by the Monday we had nothing. In her letter she had requested an urgent phone call, and there was absolutely no contact made. So on the Monday evening, I think Joanne might have alluded to some of this because that was last Monday, there was a meeting with the Finance Minister, Chief Secretary to Treasury and the Secretary of State as well, and the Minister had asked for a formal letter to clarify that, a response basically to her letter, and she had also asked if a formal communication could be sent to the deals, because any of these deals had heard was something at official level and then whatever had transpired in the media. So at that stage there was still an awful lot of confusion. We did eventually get a letter from the Chief Secretary to the Treasury that confirmed Belfast was unaffected, and that the Derry and
the letter his official sent, which is contrary to the letter his email sent.
Yes.
The email his letter sent, the email his official sent.
It was sent on the Wednesday before, yes. Yeah. So was there a U-turn there?
Okay. And Derry obviously was going to say, what did he say about the other two?
That's the stage where we'll find out that it was because of the stage of the process and that they would be paused until the outcome of the spending review. So at that stage we hadn't even heard, because the spending review is being done in the two parts, we hadn't heard it was definitely going to be October. So we have found out from the Northern Ireland office that they have had assurances. Apparently there are letters to the Northern Ireland office, and we're trying to get a copy of that as well, because obviously the deals can't really wait until October, and it would be awful if that to wait any further. So our understanding clearly from NIO is that it will be the end of October that this decision will be made.
So there will be, the NIO have indicated to you that there will be a go-no-go by October. Obviously, with there is a qualitative difference between saying just pause that for now while we go through the process, and everything, we're back to zero base, everything is kind of, nothing can be, there's a difference there. You haven't had any steer that it's one or the other, do you know what I mean? So there's a difference between saying this is not happening until you hear otherwise, or pause work. I know that might seem like a time, but have they,
you're right,
they properly?
It's just limbo land.
Okay.
What does it mean? It's just pause. So, and actually, whenever everything had just transpired, so that first weekend, a lot of the 4 deals actually were having special deal meetings and special council meetings, etc. And there was that real confusion, and what do we do? Does this mean that we tell our consultants not to put the pens down, not to develop anything else? Are we then going to lose some of this work? Some of the partners were talking about an experience through COVID where there was a bit of stop-start, and then when the pause button is hopefully unpaused, you then can't get the consultants to come back and do it. So, there were very valid questions, and we had, the Finance Minister had put that to the Chief Secretary of the Treasury that evening to try and get some clarity, but we don't really have much more clarity. Now, there was another letter from CST to the Finance Minister saying that Treasury officials stand ready to work with us, and we'll certainly be taking them up on that offer.
Okay, I mean, I think we have actions we can. It would be helpful for us to see what the letter you have from the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, and it may be for us to correspond with both the NIO and the Treasury. Okay, I'm going to bring in colleagues at this stage. Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to both for coming here and outlining this. I think from listening to the detail as you went through all of the city deals there, it just really highlights how important that they are to Northern Ireland at every single corner of it, transformative to our economy, to our infrastructure, and it is something that obviously was delivered through the DUP Confidence and Supply Agreement, and we're very proud that whenever the opportunity came, we took the opportunity as a party to bring something that delivered for everyone right across Northern Ireland. Obviously, we also had the rollout of the rural broadband as well. So
you're a bit quiet there, Paul. I'll fall asleep.
And as I say, it's just so important. And I think as we've got into the detail of developing the plans to roll out the partners, you can really see how much it means to communities right across Northern Ireland and the difference that it's going to make. So it's great to see such a strong reaction and unity across the board in supporting the delivery of these. A big thing for me in my area benefits from the Belfast deal, and a big thing that I feel on the ground since it happened is risk to the confidence of those that may be coming to procure for services. There is a real nervousness, as you said, you talked about £30 million of commercial investment in one of the deals there. Is there any work going on about the rebuilding of the confidence around those that are hoping to invest that are outside of it, that we can give any sort of assurance that this won't happen to them again?
You're absolutely right, and the chaos and the confusion from that Friday, it had got
Wouldn't have
to
wanted
the
your job
contractors.
last weekend anyway.
No, there wasn't a lot of sleep. So after it transpired over the weekend that Belfast was unaffected, so we'd had an email to that effect before we'd had the meeting and the formal letters. We were able then to communicate that to the Belfast Region City deal. They then came out with a statement on, I think it was the Monday, to say, we've heard, and I was able to share the email, like the one sentence email that we got. So they were reassured by that. And then they actually had a letter that, so the Belfast Region City deal has 6 separate councils. They then had shared a letter, I think it was maybe Newry and Mourne, sorry if that's not the right council, but they had sent a letter already to the contractors to say, don't panic, everything is in order. And then I know the different councils were sharing that and sending it out to give that reassurance, as you say. For the other deals, I suppose that's less certain right now because they still have this pause on the Treasury side of the funding. So, that is a really tricky space to be in. So that's the big risk in this, that we are actually undermining the idea of what the deals are supposed to do to bring that private sector investment in, and then the complementarity between the deals. So I know you're on the Belfast Region City deal, but when we were looking at some of the projects earlier, you'll see analytics, robotics, the digitisation, advanced manufacturing. There's an awful lot of projects across the 4 deals with the same kind of things that are happening, and getting that right across Northern Ireland is just such a good idea. So the complementarity there is potentially being lost too, and the whole issue of the cities and the rurals, etc. So we very much feel it's all 4 deals need to happen here for all those communities.
Yeah, and that is my big concern, that whenever this was secured, the investment was secured, and the whole investment was based on the agreement of the deals, and the outward investment being put at risk is just so disappointment from a snap decision on a Friday evening, poorly communicated by the Labour government. So
absolutely.
Thanks very much, Chair.
Okay, and Nicola Brogan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you both for your update here this afternoon. I represent West Tyrone, which falls under the Fermanagh Council, which is part of the Mid-South West deal. And last week, following the announcement of the pause, I met with different deal partners in the council and that, who are obviously extremely concerned about this and very frustrated and distressed about it, really, because they are left in limbo now. And as much as they are trying to carry on and to instill confidence in the rest of the deal partners and those involved, they are left with a huge amount of uncertainty. And I suppose one of the points you'd made earlier about the Causeway Glens and Coast, about the private investment they had, that's another issue we're concerned about as well. So I suppose my question would be, what kind of impact do you think that has on the entire growth deal, the risk to that private sector investment, and just uncertainty around the pause?
I think it's a risk, and it's a real shameful risk. I mean, obviously we're all pressing for this pause to be lifted, and as soon as we get that confirmation, if it goes our way, I think there's going to be an awful lot of handling we're going to need to do with the local stakeholders and the businesses to really reassure them this was an unusual blip and that a new government had come in, etc., etc. I mean, I'm not sure if Hilary Benz, the Secretary of State, when he's been talking recently, it's all about growth, and he's talking about growth across all of Northern Ireland, and I think there have been strong messages coming from his side of UKG as well, and I think that should be reassuring for the businesses. So we very much see this as a Treasury issue, that they are looking at all of their spending, very long-term spending, by the way. This isn't actually, none of this funding is really going to be spent in the next 3 years, this spending review period. So that those high-level points need to be made as well. But it's a good point, and I think there's much work to be done now to reassure those businesses, please, when we get the pause lifted.
That actually is a good point, that the projects involved in this are meant to be about economic productivity and developing the economy locally. And if that's their objective as well, then we should be joining up with that there. And another point, going back to why the 4 deals working together is so important. I know you talked about the position of Scotland and Wales, and that was raised with me last week by the deal partners. So I'm not sure if you have any more information on that, but Chair, maybe that's something the committee could ask on Scotland.
We can sure, one way we could do it quickly is contact our counterparts in other committees.
Fair enough.
Chair, we are aware that the Argyll and Butte deal is the only one that wasn't fully signed in Scotland. All the other areas in Scotland have a deal in place. That's the only one that wasn't signed.
Again, that's because when that funding was announced, it's not that our deals weren't doing anything. It's just, it was across all the other regions. It was announced first, and then here. So, I mean, it's not that they were doing anything wrong. Do you know what I mean?
Of course, I don't think.
Really, that's really it. I suppose it does feel very unfair for rural areas again to be neglected, and I completely understand the feeling of those involved in it. And although they're saying it's because the deals weren't as far advanced as others, as you say, the head's term is due to be signed in the middle of next month. So a lot of work had gone on in the background leading up to this, and it is frustrating for rural areas to be neglected once again. So hopefully this will be lifted. But thank you for your update. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, okay, thanks very much today. Thanks for the briefing so far. Just two sort of questions. One, what's the overall quantum that the Northern Ireland Executive and the local government are in for at the moment? How much are we committed?
So,
what's the total?
It's 617 million from UK government. That's across the 4 deals. It's 162 for the 2 gross deals, 126 for Mid-South West and 36 for Causeway Coast and Glens, and then the executive match funded that and brought in the additional 100 million complementary funds, so 717.
Yeah, so in total it's 1.2 billion or whatever it is, but sort of just half of it was supposed to be from UKG, and the rest of it we were supposed to raise either from the Northern Ireland Executive or whatever happens to be, and we've got that, we have profiled that funding for the length of the time that the deal is just supposed to be there.
It'll be top sliced of the RC deal.
Yeah, because it's capex and the rest of it. So that being the case, it's notable that Treasury pressed the pause button just as we were going through in the various phases, as they would understand it. We're going through project definition, which is X amount of money to start drawing down for significant construction work. It was because AMEC is one of the ones that I'm very conscious of. We've actually started doing a lot of construction work on, which means there'll be a substantial increase in the drawdown coming from HMG to be able to achieve that. Do you think that that's what the trigger mechanism has been? Because previously, beforehand, this has all been sort of fairly low level. Now this is about to become substantial. Is that how it became on the sort of, do you think that's how it became on the Treasury's radar? They've all of a sudden gone, oh flip me, we're going to be caught for £500 million here?
Personally, I don't. I'm not sure that logic or that much thinking had gone into it. And for them then to...
That's pretty trying to think there was any thinking that went on to it, except for one official said, yeah, slice that. Yeah. So,
but you turned on the Belfast region city, so it's okay now, and the Derry's okay now. So the gross deals won't spend in this 3-year period.
I just wonder, and actually having spent a lot of time talking to people in the construction industry who are extremely concerned about this, and I can't overemphasize this, Chair. Out there, people are very, very worried because this is something that is sending a strong message about investing in any infrastructure projects in Northern Ireland. If we can't be getting this right, what can? These are the ones we thought were copper fastened that was going to go through. Yeah. These are the ones that have hit the buffers first. So that is a real significant concern that, particularly in the construction industry, people have about even bidding for public service contracts in Northern Ireland and what they're likely to do. But the significant question is that having signed legal documents and contracts, where does the risk now lie if we have signed up for contracts and the funding doesn't come through? Does that risk lie with the Northern Ireland Executive, or are we in a situation where, with signed contracts, come the comprehensive spending review, we don't get the money we think we're going to go to? Does that mean then that we are liable, or is HMG liable for part and parcel of the things they've already signed off to?
So the only contracts that are signed at the minute are in Belfast Region City deal, and that funding is okay. So there aren't any contracts signed in the 2 gross deals, and it's their funding from UKG that's been paused. Okay. So we're not actually in that scenario. However, when again that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, when it all kicked off, we were already working mostly with DFE, because they're accountable department for the UKG funding coming through to Belfast, and we were starting to calculate what contracts are in here, what stage are they at? Are there actual, the contracts for funding with the department, the accountable body, but are there actual contracts with contractors and builders, etc., and what kind of compensation events could we potentially be looking at. So we were starting to calculate all of that, but that's now not an issue because the Belfast Region City deal and the Derry deal have been confirmed by Treasury that they are safe and that funding will continue. So the issue really now is just the two growth deals, and they don't have contracts yet.
They haven't signed any contracts.
Because they're at the stage they've done their strategic outline cases. The next stage after heads of terms is the outline business case. After that they sign the deal, which is what Derry did last week, and then comes the contracts for funding.
So how does that leave us with something like the Enniskillen bypass, which is part of the funding?
So the Enniskillen bypass is ever so slightly different in that there was a shortfall. If you recall, I think it was under New Deal funding. The Secretary of State had pledged that 15.2 million would go from New Deal for that particular project. And then
Can you approach, or New Deal as in?
There was New Deal funding. It wasn't MDNA. There was a package of funding, but it was around the same time anyway. But then all of that funding, if you remember, even levelling up round 3, etc., was removed and it was put into this wider package. So then, when the executive was restored in February, there was, concern. Well, what's happening to that 15.2 million that was pledged for Enniskillen? So there was executive agreement then that out of the wider funding package that was part of the restoration, that 15.2, they actually increased it to 16.2 because since then costs had increased. So 16.2 would be taken out of the executive's capital budget.
So despite them not getting the South West City deal, we're still in we're still in the situation that the bypass has got the money.
Yes, it's executive funded. So just to be clear as well, the executive funding contribution to the city and growth deals is for infrastructure, tourism, regen, and the UKD funding is for digital and innovation. So there is that difference there. But arguably the digital and innovation is what increases the growth in the economy.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, if you wish to ask a final question. Is there a slight... Philip Brett wishes to bring you up?
Two quick questions. So who's Joanne's co-chair from the NIO?
It's a grade 5 in the NIO, Kieran Hayes.
Oh yes, okay, yeah.
Kieran.
Okay. And are you happy to share the letter that Minister Archibald received from Chief Secretary to the Treasury last Monday? I don't think I've seen that yet.
I have made a note to request that. Yes, so I'll check with the private office.
And then the first project that will officially be completed within the Belfast City Region deal and the first City Deal project, obviously across Northern Ireland, to be opened officially will be...
So AMAC has construction, but Studio Ulster, it didn't need to be built.
Yes.
So the Harbour Commission, there is the building there, and they're fitting it out, just buying the kit. And there's spend on that, so it essentially they don't have to build on it, so it's a faster project.
Is it still due to be finished in February?
Do we have that?
As far as we're aware, yeah.
I should have said I have a detailed update on each of the projects I can share with you
That'll be
afterwards.
Really helpful. Yeah, that would be most helpful.
Yeah.
We'll all go down for a visit to that. I think we should.
To the chair, I think we'll decide that in proper order. But just one final question from me, and this has been a really useful update. Just to play devil's advocate, obviously we hope and we will use our good offices to try and get a proper definition of what pause means. If we are in a situation, I think it would be, this has been handled appallingly and just chaotically really, I think in particular. I think there's been a huge amount of cock-up rather than conspiracy here, repeated cock-up. But should we get to a situation where we get a clear indication that this is going to be resolved properly for the two outstanding growth deals, are we, by talking up some of the negative, are we kind of unnecessarily worrying certain potential commercial investors at the minute? If we've got clarity on Belfast and Derry, is the best thing to try and get clarity urgently that this is going to be unpaused, and that way we can kind of avoid some unnecessary anxiety.
And that's what we're pressing for, Chair, but I'm not sure if we'll get it before the 30th of October. We're hearing at official level we won't, but we're continuing to press for that. They shouldn't have any pause. They shouldn't have to wait at all.
No, I completely get that, but what I'm saying is, are we between, because there's a judgment we need to maintain obviously a degree of pressure, because it needs to be clear that there's unanimity from Northern Ireland that this needs to be unpaused. But if we think the unpausing is going to happen, and if people can get that indication, either at official or political level, are we slightly risking? So we've heard some fairly doom-laden warnings about, you know, completely compromising people's confidence in Northern Ireland as an investment proposition. Is there a slight risk of slightly overdoing some of that if we think we're going to get a positive resolution? And by the way, this should never have been an issue in the first place. We shouldn't need a resolution.
And I think that's the crux of it. The way this was handled, it just came out, and it was all four, and then it wasn't all four. It was only two. You know, it should have been handled in the right way, and perhaps none of that needed to have been shared. But that's not what happened.
If you're able to get that update from Argyll and Bute Council, could you share it with us? Because
Absolutely.
I think that would be really helpful. Okay. No one else indicated to ask a question. That's been really helpful. Thank you, Gillian and Jason, and we will take that away and we will continue to press on our side. And we have further actions, I think, to get in touch with the other committees.
Just to get a members' agreement, so we committee will write to the Scottish and Welsh finance committees to ask what they know about this and any kind of extra information they have or can give us, but also potentially looking at further briefings.
Well, yeah, I think we can get our information back, and then it may be that it is useful for us to get a briefing ahead of the end of October, but I think we should get the information first.
We're obviously going to ask for the Chief Secretary of the Treasury's letter.
Yeah. Because I'm not sure it's useful for us to get, if we don't have any more information to interrogate, having a further, because we have a lot on our plate, having a further evidence session where we're just kind of, is not necessarily hugely productive, but I do think if needs be, it's worthwhile, and that will give us more ballast to be able to make the argument.
I was just checking, our letters obviously have now gone to the Chief Secretary of the Treasury and the NIO, but we haven't had acknowledgements. Both ask about, as members discussed last week, what a pause means, when unpausing can happen. Any impact assessments that were done around pauses?
Yes.
Obviously, we've learned a bit more today about geographical spread. We're aware that the one Scottish deal that's paused was the only one that wasn't signed. Yeah. But we have no indication of what's going on in Wales or the north of England. So we'll gather what information we can, Chair.
Okay, that's most helpful. Unless there's any further comments, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 9, and that is an oral briefing in closed session. And just as we go into closed session, I would...
Committee Room 21. Sound. 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 Committee Room 21. Sound.
Correspondence to go through.
Notes from that.
Is there any actions coming out of that that we can announce? Probably not.
I don't think we have any actions coming out of that because we will hear whenever the budget sustainability plan is ready to be announced.
The department has committed to, once the executive will see the budget sustainability plan tomorrow.
Yes.
It's scheduled for that, assuming everything goes according to plan.
Yeah.
And the department has undertaken to forward that plan to the committee prior to publication for the committee to be able to see it before it's published. Publication is scheduled for the 30th, which is next Monday, as the chair has already said.
Yeah, and Queeve is lined up to do it. There's a whole bunch of statements due on Monday anyhow, so yeah.
It should all follow that choreography.
Choreography is the word.
Okay. We go back to our correspondence. 10.1 is correspondence from the Committee of Justice relating to the Civil Service Handbook and Sickness Policy. The Committee for Justice has written to the Department regarding a recent briefing it received from the Assembly Research Service on mental health issues and the criminal justice system. It has asked the Department of Justice to engage with the Department of Finance to ensure that psychological and mental health issues are added to Civil Service staff sickness policy. This committee has been copied into the correspondence. Members will recall that this committee has requested an oral briefing on the recent publication of sickness absence figures for next year in 23-24 to explore a number of issues. We await confirmation of the date, but have indicated to DALO that there is a slot on the 6th of November. We have also asked for information on the department's plans to tackle the high levels of sickness absence, particularly in relating to long-term absence, the majority of which relates to mental ill health. We have already received data on comparisons with other jurisdictions. This will be presented to us whenever other information requests are received. We'll discuss it then. Steve Aiken wishes to come in.
Yeah, just two things. First of all, declaration of interest. I've got some casework with prison officers and ex-prison officers who have been serving, and my particular concern is the very high levels of mental health, sickness and absenteeism, and how the Department of Justice seems to be not dealing with this effectively. There is a real marked, if we look at the figures across the whole of the Northern Ireland Civil Service, it's very clear that the Department of Justice spike is there specifically from the prison service. There's something fundamentally needs reviewed within the prison service about how we deal with mental health issues and sickness health issues for both serving prison officers and those who have recently retired or worryingly have been retired. That's something that I'm seeing quite a lot of at the moment. So I would particularly like sort of more information on that. And I think if we're having that briefing, Peter, that would be, I would raise that then.
Sure, we flagged up, particularly because members raised it last week, the issue of the significant proportion, I think it was of long-term sick. The vast majority of that is related to mental health and mental illness issues. So we've asked specifically what the department is doing to address that, which runs in the same direction as what the Justice Committee is looking at as well. So when we get a date, we'll be expecting the officials to speak specifically on that.
Just through the chair, I refer to a previous, when the Finance Committee sat previously, we had evidence when they tried to discount PTSD as an illness, and I think the committee took a very dim view of that. And I think we still haven't got to a proper understanding within the Northern Ireland Civil Service of the particular stresses and the strains that the prison service have been under, and how we deal with that, because these are the key people within the sort of the Northern Ireland Civil Service that we need to be looking at. And if the Justice Department keep on saying it's a finance issue, we should be taking it.
Okay, put those remarks in the record. I think we are talking about it in future weeks, so we can reflect and discuss it further. The next agenda item is the draft forward work programme. Members, the draft forward work programme is at page 515 of the tabled pack. The clerk is going to give us an update. We have a few outstanding points.
Yes, there are bits and pieces, Chair. So one thing I really wanted to highlight, and the Deputy Chair has kindly reminded me about this, is members will already have started hearing about effective questioning sessions that they're going to be looking at in various committees. We are down for the 16th of October, so it's reasonably late in the cycle. However, what I need to stress is these are not identical sessions. Each session, and it's John Sturrock is coming, and he's very much seen as the expert in this field. Each session is tailored specifically to the issues of that particular committee. We'll also be sending John the various aspects of what the committee has done, the sorts of things that it's likely to want to do. So this is not just going to be the same as what happens in another committee. This is very specifically tailored to this committee. And therefore, we've built it into the committee meeting itself. There will be other items around that. So just to stress to members that this is not something that they will have already received in another committee. This is very much tailored and bespoke for this committee. Again, next week we're starting at 1 o'clock because we can have a very packed agenda next week. We, as the Chair's mentioned a couple of times during the meeting, we haven't got a pin down on the interim PSTB. PSTB.
Very hard, obviously.
I know. I'm always conscious of that. We haven't got pinned on that because we're waiting for confirmation from Hawks. So we're still looking for a date for that.
Is that just Hawks or is that?
No, that'll be the whole board. So the three members that we've been discussing earlier on, just to get their view on a lot of the questions that members have raised. We've been asking for that now for, I think we've probably been looking for it for a couple of weeks, maybe at least from last week. But we're just looking for, obviously, everybody's diary to be coordinated. We do have briefings now confirmed on PFG fiscal framework, and obviously we have the Fiscal Council coming up next week. They'll be able to comment more on the issues that were raised today around the bill. The Financial Services Union have confirmed for the 9th of October, which is the day we also have Cash Access UK and a research briefing on the banking landscape. We're also now in communication with the Financial Conduct Authority representatives. It'll maybe take a bit longer to get them in. I know a representative will be here in November. I don't think it actually coordinates with a committee day, but we'll see what we can do around that. But otherwise, we'll have them come through Zoom. We're in the process of organising that. The Minister's office have come back on her availability, and they are talking about the 27th of November. We will go back and push for earlier if we can. That's still quite some considerable time away, and there's a lot of high-profile departmental issues that'll be happening in the meantime. And we've arrived at a date for our strategic planning session, so this will be a much deeper strategic planning session, and that's for the 13th of November. That will be where the committee tries to set an outline work plan for the remainder of the mandate. I always say that advisedly because events always intervene, but we're looking to do that on the 13th of November.
Okay. People are happy enough. So, and obviously we are also, as well as our on 9th of October, we are also in contact with, or seeking to get in contact with, the FCA as well about potential evidence on financial services provision here. Okay. Anyone wish to comment? Grand. Okay. In that case, all that is required is to raise any other business. If any members, any other business? Okay. No.
No, sorry, I just wondered where the name had gone.
Then the next item is date, time, and place of next meeting. We are meeting here again, not in the Senate chamber.
Chair, there are some technical issues with the Senate chamber that need to be ironed out, and as such, it has not been released to us for committee meetings. I will talk more with you about those issues, and the committee can decide how it wants to approach those issues.
When the cameras are off?
Possibly, Chair.
Okay. Well, I would say that it would probably be quicker, and I don't know, maybe cheaper. Well, I don't know what the cost is. If we were to fly as a committee over to and requisition the use of the U.S. Senate chamber on Capitol Hill to have our meetings in there. It feels like we've been waiting for such a long time to use the Senate chamber, but ultimately it's about doing the work we're doing. So it's next Wednesday in this room again, room 21 at 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock. At 1 o'clock. So completely fine for people to bring sandwiches in, should you wish.
There will be biscuits.
There will be biscuits. Okay, but I'm going to put the question to the committee now adjourned. It's now adjourned. Thank you.
Committee Room 21. Sound.